All right, welcome back here to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. Thank you again. Once again, I'm always going to say this. I'm always going to give you a shout out and say thank you for pressing play. It's a little bit like, if a tree falls in the woods, but no one's there, does it make a sound? Well, does a podcast really exist if no one listens? I'm not sure it does. So I'm so glad you're listening and really grateful for you being here today. If this is your first time, my name is Mike Cunningham. I'm the National Business Development Manager here at Gill Athletics, also known as that guy that hosts the podcast. And that's what you're here for. But what you're really here for is our guest. So let's hop into it. I'm excited about this one. We've talked about this before. There's times I have people on the show that I've known for decades. It's usually the older crowd, right? Known them for a long time. It's a lot of fun. We always learn something new. And then we get some guys and gals on the podcast I've met, but don't really know or whatnot. And that's today's case. And these are a lot of fun for me because I get to learn a whole lot about whole new people. And that just really excites me because that's what kind of I'm all about. There's a reason why we named it the Connections Podcast, right? So let's get to it. Help me welcome from Quinnipiac University, the wise, the wonderful, Mr. Brendan Wilkins. Brendan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. I'm glad you're here. Before I start, I can't remember if I've told you this before, but publicly, I have to tell my Quinnipiac story. Have I told you my Quinnipiac story? I don't think I have.
I'm not sure. I think when we saw a convention, I remember you told me something, but I don't know if that's what you're going for.
Yeah, every time Quinnipiac comes up, I have to tell this story. So my alma mater is Troy University, and I have a 13-year-old boy. If you've listened at all during for the podcast, you probably know his name is Troy. When my wife was pregnant, we were talking about what we were going to name our son, and I really wanted to name my son after my university. It's where I found my faith, and just so much of my life came from that university. And she allowed me. Spoiler alert, right? She allowed me, and she looked at me and said, "Well, I guess I'm just glad you didn't go to Quinnipiac University," which I just thought was funny. She knew Quinnipiac, which was great. I love that she knew that. And then I was like, "Yeah, if I'd went to Quinnipiac, I'd have named him like Quinny or Pack. I don't know. It would have been a little bit different name than Troy." So I love Quinnipiac just for the it's in my life, even though you don't know it's in my life.
Well, if you have a daughter, you can name her Quinn. That'll be a good one.
Quinn would be beautiful, actually. I do like that. And I did have a daughter, Cassidy. But if your kid's named Quinn, someone out there, that is actually a really cool name. What's the mascot? It's like a wildcat or something, right?
Bobcats.
Bobcats, yeah. So you could like Quinn Bobby or something. I don't know. That gets a little too crazy there. Yeah. All right, man. Let's get into it here. Brendan, thank you so much, man. One of the most valuable things that you can give me is your time. And so I'm super grateful. We're in the fall right now, and that's a pretty busy time. You got new kids on the campus. You're reintroducing starting practice. Or you're getting, kind of teaching all over 101 from the beginning again. So really, really thankful for you taking some time out and joining us and talking about your journey today, man. Really excited about this.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's been I always tell my athletes like the breaks are like one of my favorite times, one of my worst times, because like I look forward to having the break, but then because I spend so much time with them, I start like missing them, and I always feel like the end of the outdoor season is like a really bad breakup, because then we just split, no one says goodbye, and especially the seniors, and I may or may not ever see you again. So
It's true.
I always get excited when I love having my time off, of course, but I always get excited when we start back up.
That's a good, I never thought about it. Yeah, I coached for 10 seasons. I never thought about that. It's fairly abrupt. And if you have like one group that goes on to nationals, and maybe, for at least my kids, most of them didn't go to nationals, you almost have to do it twice. You have the one, and, you still get a group that goes on, and then it literally just happens like, all right, well, the meet was over. See you in August. Or to your point, the seniors like, good luck.
Right.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Well, let's learn this journey, Brendan. My favorite growing up, I was a comic book guy, and my favorite issues were the very first one, the origin issues. Like, how did Spider-Man how did Peter Parker become Spider-Man? How did Clark Kent become Superman? What's your origin story, man? Where does track and field start for you?
I feel like I was somewhat of I guess, a late introduction to track. I didn't really get into it until my sophomore year of high school. Um, I was always basketball, football. Those were kind of like my sports when I did. And growing up, I played baseball. But once I got to high school, I kind of that wasn't my sport. So the springtime, I wouldn't really do much. Some years I would play like travel basketball, and then but what I could always do is I could always jump. So in basketball warm-ups, I'd be in the layup lines, and our athletic director would be he'd be at every game for all the sports, and I'd be in the layups line dunking and getting big rebounds. And he said, you should come out to the track team. And um, I never thought myself as someone who was very, flexible or anything, or so I was like, oh, maybe I can try the long jump, but I don't know about that high jump thing. And then
Mhm.
that's what I ended up doing. So, yeah, got into it right after that, and just mainly just kind of high jump throughout high school.
Where are we growing up at?
Sorry, so I'm from Connecticut,
Okay.
Stonington, Connecticut. Um, Familiar areas would be like Mystic, Connecticut. Kind of, have you ever watched like Mystic Pizza or like
Yeah.
the Mystic
Okay.
Aquarium?
Yeah.
So that kind of area, southeastern Connecticut. Um, yeah, Stonington High School.
So when you're playing basketball, AD sees you, is like, man, this guy can jump here. Maybe we should join the track team. You didn't do it your freshman year. When they started asking you, maybe during sophomore year, did you need to be convinced? Like it was like, oh, like a lot of times I hear the story of a kid saying, being asked, hey, let's do track, and they go, oh, I can't run. Like that's just automatic. I don't know what they automatically go to, like the mile, and they're like, oh, I can't run, like I'll die, or they go, I'm not fast. It's the mile or the 100. That's always what they kind of think of. Typically don't think of field events. Did you have to be convinced? Did you know anything about track? Like, did you watch the Olympics or anything? Or was this kind of like, I know it's an oval. I know that.
Yeah, I mean, it was outside of the Olympics, I didn't really kind of pay too much attention to it. Like I obviously knew about cross country and stuff, and I guess thought more running and
Mhm.
um but no, it wasn't my athletic director knew that I like to be pretty involved and I like to do something. And I also felt kind of weird not playing a sport. I
Mhm.
grew up doing stuff all the time. So he was kind of saying, it's like we're looking for some people to come out. We don't have many numbers on the boys side. And he's like, I think you would come and make an impact and you'd have a lot of fun with it. And he was right. And it's funny, I kind of think about just like kind of going to like back to Marvel or the
Mhm.
Spider-Verse, right?
Mhm.
I think about like kind of tiny little decisions that you make in different branches you go. And I
Yes.
always wonder if Miss Marone never said that to me, where I'd be right now. Um, so it was good, yeah. And so I was mainly a high jumper throughout high school. I would long jump every now and then and be on the relays. But it was always kind of something that I felt like basketball and football always kind of had my most attention. And I think it was like my sophomore and junior year. It just the culture wasn't really of the program wasn't super serious. It was kind of more like a laid back and stuff, and that's kind of how I treated it.
Mhm.
Um, the head coach at the time, like I'd be jumping and he'd kind of be sprawled out the on the ground with like a piece of grass in his mouth, just kind of hanging out. And my workouts would be go for like 20-minute jogs. And me and my buddies on the team, we would run for maybe 5 minutes into the woods and just kind of sit there for the rest of the 15 and then come back. Um, that's kind of how we treated it. And
Yeah.
it was good. It was fun. And I was doing well. And what I started to kind of realize was with the other sports that I loved, obviously there's a lot more there's always kind of like politics with any kind of team sport where,
Mhm.
you're fighting for playing time and, feeling like the coach doesn't like you and like I said, I loved like in football being able to run a route and jump up for the ball and use my reach and my jumping abilities. And same thing with basketball, going to get a big rebound.
Mhm.
So I could pretty much, and that was pretty much all I was good at. I wasn't fast, I couldn't dribble, I couldn't do anything else. So with jumping, I could just do the things that I like to do and that I was good at.
Right.
So then it was kind of a lot more fun and I felt it. And looking now later, and even just when I think about track and as I went on my years, I just felt like what I love about the sport the most is kind of what you put into it, you get out of it, right? You don't really have to rely on, you're on the basketball court, you don't have to rely on four other guys, having the same kind of mindset as you do
Right.
to be successful. You can kind of take it upon yourself and be successful. So um, I started kind of getting into it, especially junior year. I started picking up some traction with it and going to higher level meets and jumping a little bit higher. And then it was my senior year. We got a new coach, Ben Carroll, who I still keep in touch with this day. We've become close friends. He coached me my senior year, and you could just kind of tell immediately a giant culture shift just with the program.
Mhm.
Just the way you could tell that he was super passionate about the sport. And just, I always kind of think about just the amount of attention that he gave to all the athletes really made an impact. Whereas he has and currently he spent 1 year at my high school, and then um, he's had a job at his alma mater at the University of Rhode Island, coaching the throws program. And now they have one of the top throws programs in the Northeast. And he's been there for, maybe, my mouth's probably off, but like 14 or 15 years now. Um, so he was a throws guy, and I went from jumping 6 feet to jumping 6'6" and breaking the school record, and him having very little knowledge,
Mhm.
about the jumps. He just was passionate about what he did research, and gave that attention to me. Whereas, I wasn't, just kind of the program did a shift where people started caring about what we did, and we broke records in almost every event, and just the program kind of shifted like that.
How did that's really interesting. Very similar. We had a coach up through my junior year, had a different staff my senior year. Where I grew up in Alabama, so all the coaches were football coaches. So after junior year, the football coach got let go. So every sport got all new coaches because we got a whole new football staff my senior year. And now my coach up through my junior year didn't sit on the grass and send me out on 15-minute runs, but wasn't all that much better either. Now, I've said this before. Dennis Anderson was my coach. Love Dennis. If he was here today, I'd give him a big hug. He coached to the ability he did. He did not lay around and say, do whatever. He did as well as he could have. Love him to death. And this is I'm a little bit older than you, Brendan. This is a little bit before the time where you could even find a lot of resources to even learn how to coach other events. Senior year, Coach Rush came in and for the football, and Coach John Gross was our senior year coach, and radically different. So still not what we would today say is coach, like how you should coach, middle distance runners or whatnot, but different, a lot more harder work and stuff. And I remember how we shifted attention. Like we were all cool to be on the track team my first 3 years because we really didn't do much. Senior year is like, holy crap, we found out what work means. At least we didn't necessarily know what real track coaching was, but we learned what work was. And there were a few, let's call it the 80-20 rule, 20% that just said, oh yeah, this ain't what I signed up for, I'm out. And then a core of us that were like, okay, we want to get better at track. We just didn't know how, a bunch of kids. This is harder work, so we feel like we'll get better. And we really gravitated toward it. How the team, you talked about how you kind of changed with the new coach. How did the team, was there a lot of like exodus of like, well, man, I was cool just sitting on the high jump pit for practice. Now I gotta go do something. Nah, I'm good, man. I'll just chill at house. How'd the team react to a whole new staff?
I don't think it was so he came in the indoor season and kind of established what the program was going to be about. And I remember one of my first practices being there, a girl on the team, she was a good basketball player, and she's like, hey, like, I want to come out for track, but I also do, travel basketball. And he's like, oh, no, like, I'm not taking any part-timers. If you're going to be here, you're going to be here. So he very
Wow.
much, and he was a big guy too. So he wasn't like, no one was going to be messing with him. But you could tell a sense of like just the leadership had changed, and he went about in a way where it very much trickled down,
Yeah.
where, he held people accountable, but he also, you know, we had a great time doing what we were doing.
Yeah.
So I don't remember too many people leaving, because the track program itself wasn't that big, and the people that were there wanted to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
And he came in, it was a majority of a lot of the same staff, so he didn't come in and start like barking orders and stuff. Like,
Right.
I feel like he's had smooth transitioned very well into it.
Yeah.
So I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
been a while now, but I don't remember it too much. But
And you seem to enjoy it. You seem to reap some benefits. 6 foot is, I don't ever poo-poo anybody who does any event. 6 foot in a high jump, that's really stinking good in my opinion. But you went to 6'6", which is a remarkable improvement. You seem to be okay with the coaching change.
yeah, no, it was awesome. And like I said, I went from having someone that just was kind of hanging around with me to someone that
Mhm.
was, pushing me, and
Mhm.
I feel like I was always kind of a product of the coach that I had. And if I had someone that was, you know, just kind of like your dog, if you're laying around every day, then your dog's going to lay with you. But if you're active, you're going to be doing that. So,
Right.
um, and that kind of impact really stuck with me with the coaching. And I just saw how much of a change he made for me just by, you know, caring about me. And, you know, he was someone that, and he was humble about it too. Like he had,
Hmm.
you know, he would admit that wasn't the expert at jumps, but him and I would hop in the car and we would drive down to the next town over and work with the jumps coach there that he was friends with. And,
Wow.
you know, he gave me a lot of opportunities to, you know, he could have really been, you know, this is my guy, I'm going to be working with him, but
Hmm.
he knew what his limits were and he wanted to help me get better and wasn't afraid to do that. He also wasn't afraid to, when I PR'd in high jump, to give me a high five. He's like, all right, now go get ready for the 4x4 so we can get going. And but he was great. And he kind of helped me through, you know, once I started to get into coaching, he was someone that I could kind of pick their brain, another person I could pick their brain and kind of watch to see what he was doing. And now I get to see him all the time
Hmm.
at different meets and stuff. And it's always a pleasure to kind of see him. And
That is kind of
um,
cool.
yeah.
So, what are we thinking? Senior year, new coaches, we're doing much better. I assume you also did your football and basketball senior year. Is
Yep.
that true? Yeah. You do track, you get this new coach, and you start jumping maybe 6 foot right off the bat, which is where you ended last year, and you're 6'2", 6'4", you kind of go up. What are you thinking for school? What are you thinking for sports, academics? And along as you start to answer that, where is coaching at all in your thought process? Or are you still thinking about becoming a firefighter or an astronaut or whatever we did as kids?
I feel like I didn't really figure out what I wanted to do until even when I'm giving recruiting visits and I'll have an athlete that are coming in undecided, not sure.
Mhm.
And I was like, listen, I didn't figure out what I wanted to do until January of my senior year of college.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wow.
I, I, uh, I feel like I was looking back kind of pretty lost and,
Mhm.
you know, didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I think my transcripts reflected that because I just, you know, was all over the place and
Sure.
didn't really have a passion of or in direction of where I wanted to go. And obviously once that changed, then, you know, my the work went into it. So I wasn't really sure what I was trying to do. I knew that I had started getting recruited a little bit from track. I feel like now being on the recruiting side of it, I feel like not doing an indoor season kind of
Mm.
you know, I look at when I'm starting to compile my list, I'm looking kind of like indoor of their junior year and obviously going to,
Mhm.
and I didn't really start performing well until like my
Mhm.
end of my senior year and
Right.
recruiting at recruiting's done by then, you know, so
You would be termed a late bloomer today. It's like, oh,
yeah,
well, of course I didn't recruit you as a junior. You jumped 6 feet. You didn't do indoor, so you were still a 6 foot jumper until you started hitting your PR of 6'6", which was assumably near the end of your senior year. Yeah, it's all done, right? We all know where our money's going and wherever kids going, et cetera. Yeah.
right. So I had a few schools that reached out to me and um I ended up going to Ithaca College, which is
Mm.
in
Hmm.
the Finger Lakes in New York near where
Hmm.
Cornell is. Um it still wasn't even until I stepped on campus my first year I was even sure if I was going to continue with track and field. You know, I was that kind of lost of what I wanted to do. And
Wow.
thinking about now, if I have no idea where I'd be at. I kind of I joke with our head coach now, like if I stop coaching, I don't even know where I would be, like what other skill set I have. You know, I've
All right.
invested so much into this. So but ended going up there and you know was kind of unsure if I would fit in or not. And I think that was kind of it.
What so we know coaching isn't in your heck, you're going to Ithaca and you're not even sure really you're going to do the track thing at all as an athlete. What did you show up as an undecided major, or what were you leaning? You had to be at least leaning towards something for a career.
So I applied business. I
Hmm.
went into applied a business major. And then right before it the summer before the semester started, I changed my major to they had an exploratory program where basically it was like undeclared, but you could take like more classes, so you could kind of figure out what you wanted to do.
Cool.
So I that seemed perfect for me because I had no idea. I was thinking all different directions. I was still with business. I was thinking like um, maybe something in sport, maybe something in like sports
Right.
management,
Right.
maybe something in media and communications.
Mhm.
I really had no idea.
Any influence from family, mom, dad, aunt, uncle's a teacher, they own a business, any influence family wise?
Um, Looking back at it now, I think probably subconsciously I knew that I was going to be a coach, but like
Mm.
consciously I didn't. So my dad played professional baseball for a little bit, and my mother was a teacher. So then put together, and that's me. So and I also considered while I was in college, also considered teaching as well, and I
Hmm.
did teach for a little bit after I graduated. But I also consider coaching teaching as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
now looking back at it, now it all makes sense. That's
Hmm.
exactly what I was supposed to do.
Hmm.
Because sports was such a big influence that, I didn't really want that to end. And then having the teaching side from my mother, um, kind of came together, I guess, at the end.
But you said something earlier that really hit me because it's the way I think too. We look back throughout our lives when we get to some, and it doesn't matter. You can be 20 years old, 40 years old, 60 years old. You can look back and you see these decisions. I signed up for English 101 instead of advanced English, or things that look so small when you're doing it. It's like it's not a big deal, and it sets you on a path though, and it could set you on a different path. If you would have potentially, you could have thought, oh, dad played baseball, mom's a teacher, I'm going to go to Ithaca and I'm going to become a teacher, and absolutely hated the first year of whatever class as a education major, and then dropped out or switched your major to whatever, and not end up coaching either. You know what I'm saying? So it's the
Right.
path that you took to get today is the perfect path because it's the path that led you to here today. So it's really interesting when you said that. I was like, oh yeah, I believe that too. Like there's things where I've said this story before. When I first got into coaching, I played football and ran track, and I was in my fraternity house looking at the high school right outside our door. And I was like, oh, I really miss sports. I'm going to call and just see if they need someone to help. And I called the track coach and not the football coach. And calling the track coach led me to, my final years of coaching. I was in the SEC. I'm an SEC homer. So that was a pretty big deal for me. Right. And I started thinking, if I'd have called the football coach, but I've been like, could I be $1 million offensive coordinator in the SEC? My finances might have been a little different. My life quality could have been a lot different as well. So I don't look back with regret, but it's like, oh man, I could have easily called either one. I was as successful. I was probably more successful in football than I was track, to be honest with you. But I called track, and that led me where I am today. I mean, it's beautiful. So I love that. Okay, so talk to us about you really kind of haven't nailed it for us yet. So did you join the track team at Ithaca?
I did. Yes, I
Okay, all
did.
right.
Sorry.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's good, good. So did you stay with high jumping? Talk to us about kind of that athletic career as a college athlete.
Mainly continued high jumping,
Mhm.
which the all 4 years was predominantly a high jumper. Um, It was like my junior and senior year. I asked my coach if I could start being on like the C, D team relays. Just because mainly high jump would be the first event.
Mhm.
Like, we get there at 9 a.m. Men's high jumps going on, and then I sit there for the rest of the day. So I remember asking my coach, you think I could be on like the 4x1 or try a 4x4? Just, I
Yeah.
don't have to be on the top team, but I hate
I
just
do
sitting here and
something.
going,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I would do that, but pretty much all 4 years at Ithaca College, I high jumped. Yeah.
What kind, I'm always interested in this. What kind of athlete were you? And what I mean by that is it's easy for us, and I'm gonna say today, but my generation of coaches, we were making these same statements of where we say, oh, these athletes, they don't know, they don't do any studying of their event. They don't know who, in your case, they don't know who the top high jumpers are. They don't know blah, 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 blah. What kind of athlete were you? Did you know, and this kind of goes through high school and college here for this question. Did you know who the other good high jumpers in the area or region were? Did you know who the Olympic champion was? Did you know what the world record? What, like, were you a high jump track nerd, or were you just like, yeah, man, I high jump?
Yeah, it's kind of, first of all, I would say if I was coaching myself, I feel like I would hate it. Like I could not stand myself. Just thinking about like the things that I was doing and just like the mentality I had. And I guess which is part of the reason why I got into coaching to kind of help people not make that same mistake. But
Yeah.
no, I don't. I obviously knew the guys I was competing against.
Uh-huh.
But outside my little bubble, I don't think of upstate New York. I don't think I really knew too many of
Yeah.
other high jumpers now.
Yeah. So you knew, like, going into the meet, you'd look at the roster and be like, oh, okay, I'm fourth or fifth supposedly on this paper, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or if there was like, maybe you had a stud, you went to a meet and there was like a, guy who jumped 6'10" or 7, you're like, oh, okay, well, second place ain't bad. Maybe if I can get that, you kind of knew that, but you didn't know, like, oh, it takes such and such to win the state, or when you got into college, the national champ jumps X, Y, or Z, and I don't know who necessarily qualified for Olympic. You didn't know. I always call that track nerdom. You didn't really kind of go that far.
It was weird. Like I was thinking about this a couple years ago. I feel like I didn't really even know. I think it was mainly because our team at the time would occasionally maybe send, because it was a Division III program.
Right.
It still is, and we'd maybe send like one guy every two. The women would send a lot more to the national championships, but I feel like I didn't even know the national championships were a thing for some reason. So
Yeah.
like I was more focused on qual, because I knew I didn't really know what that take, or kind of, because it just wasn't a thing
Mhm.
in our program.
Mhm.
Um, and now looking back, I was like, wow, I'd had some stud women that I was teammates with that I didn't even know they were that good. Like we had national champions, and I was like, no, no, that's
Wow.
Emma. Like I know her. Like
Yeah.
she's on my team,
Yeah.
and she's good, but I didn't realize she was
A-
that good.
And what year is it? What year are you in college? Years are you in college?
Um, fall 2010 to spring 2014.
Yeah, that's not that long ago. That's interesting to me, because I think sometimes and social media certainly has 10x to 100x since 2014, let's say. But sometimes we think, because there's so much information out there, it's like, man, these kids, they know everything, they know what it takes, and or at least they should. This 6'6" high jumper shouldn't be coming to me asking for a full ride when it takes 7'2" to make the D3 national, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, man, you're fairly intelligent guy here, if kind of understand things that are going on. And here you were like, man, I didn't really know necessarily thing, and you're in it, you're involved. It's not like you're 1 year on the team, 1 year you're not. Like, you're on the team, and it's kind of like, yeah, well, that's Emma. It's just
Yeah.
interesting on that. Yeah, I think there's some empathy lessons, I think, there sometimes for our kids, that each kid is on the team for a different reason. And some are on there because they want to be a national champion, or they want to be an Olympian. And then others, I like being part of a team. I like improving. I like the physical health aspect of it. I like my coach. And that's not bad either. Gosh, I don't know if a coach could handle 100 kids, I'll just say 100 kids, however many kids that all were hard driven, wanted to be, and had maybe some ability to be national champ, or like, that would kind of drive you a little bit crazy too. Like, that's its own set of toughness, if you will, as a coach. So it's just interesting to me that, it's not that long ago, and you're like, yeah, maybe I thought maybe there's a champion. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want you to get me wrong. And it's not that I wasn't competitive.
No,
I
I
had
didn't say
my
that.
target.
That's
Yeah. No,
different. No,
no.
no, that's different. That's different. Yeah, yeah.
I felt like I kind of lived in my little
Mm-hmm.
bubble. Like conference was really important to us, and kind
Mm-hmm.
of like our region. And I knew I had my targets that I was competitive with, and kind of knew
Mm-hmm.
where I stood. And but yeah, for some reason I never really looked outside of that. And as soon as I got in coaching, that was like an ultimate goal of mine. It's like, let's go to there,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that was kind of the culture of the program I was in. But just interesting now, and it just wasn't kind of, we weren't really bringing a lot of guys to the meets at that
Mm-hmm.
time. So it wasn't really something that maybe I thought was attainable, just because no one else was doing it.
Yeah, what you're describing there is culture. And that's not a bad culture necessarily. That might have been a bad culture for someone who was, oh man, I know what it takes to make nationals. I'm a centimeter away. I'm going to go to Ithaca. I'm like, oh yeah, the culture is going to have to change for this to be a positive experience. I'm not sure that's going to be a real good fit there. So culturally, that's what you're describing as culture, and that there's nothing wrong with it. Cultures are culture, unless there's a bad culture of, like, we beat our athletes or something like that. No cultures are bad in that sense. So that's just the culture that it was then. It could be, I mean, that's 10 years ago. It could be, and probably is, a lot different today in 2024 or 2025. So, cultures, they adapt, they grow, and some regress. So, okay. You mentioned you didn't even really know until you're such a late bloomer. I love this. You said you didn't even really know until like January of your senior year that you might want to go into coaching. So what changed the light switch? What went from like, yeah, I'm kind of trying to figure out what I want to be to like, oh, I want to be a track coach. What happened?
I think it was kind of like very much like kind of I was saying before, where whatever kind of leadership that I would have in front of me, I very much follow that. And my junior and senior year, I had a it was one of my teammates who was a couple years older than me, and he had stayed um, to be a grad assistant, and then he stayed an extra year for me to graduate, and then he went on. But he was getting into coaching, and I could see how passionate it was for him, and I kind of like followed in his footsteps a little bit.
Mhm.
And I think the more I kind of thought about it my senior year as graduation was approaching, and kind of thinking more about it, I was seeing what he was doing and seeing how much he loved get to do it. And I was like, you still get to come to practice every day and kind of work with us, and like this is awesome. And I remember it was I think we had a meet in January at Cornell because they were right on the other hill. Um, and I remember I would after every meet I would call my dad and kind of give him updates. And I was like, Dad, I think I want to get into coaching. And he had been in kind of the college realm because even after um, he was done with his career, he would he would umpire at
Mm.
as a part-time gig, and he would um, be around college athletics a lot, and he knew a lot of the college coaches in the area, and he kind of was pretty gave it to me straight. He's like, if you want to get in coaching, first couple years, the first part of your career is going to be pretty tough. You're going to be paying some dues. It's going to suck, but eventually it'll work out. And but it's an awesome career. It's a really rewarding career, but do know that it's going to be pretty hard. And that's something that my coach would say once I kind of approached him about it. Um, and he would always just just he would always just say, he's like, we don't do this for the money, we don't do this for the money. He's like, that's not why we get into coaching. If that's why you're getting into coaching, you're in the wrong sport, or maybe just in the wrong field just in general. So
Yeah.
I think it was that, or just kind of seeing the people around me. And I think that the parental kind of
Mm.
genes kind of kicked in, kind of that light bulb kind of went off. And um but the grad assistant, Chris Wilbur, he was kind of like the first mentor of mine. Whereas once I had also let him know that, and immediately is like, you need to take all these courses, you need to read all this stuff by Boo, you need to read all this stuff by Dan Paff, and I didn't even know who these guys are. He's like, look them up, find anything you can read, and take all these level one, level twos,
Yeah.
all the specialist courses. So I just whatever he told me to do at that point, I was doing it.
So tell me what that actually means, because you're in your senior year still, right? And I guess maybe this is a journey because you said senior year and he stayed through his grad assistant and things like that. When you say he said, go read everything from Boo, everything from Dan, both podcast alums, by the way. So if you're listening and you want to know more about those two amazing people, same app you're using now, search their names. They're amazing individuals. Go to level one, things like that. What was like, because what you just described right there in that 30 seconds, that's a lot. Like some people don't do all
Oh
that
yeah.
in a career. How did that actually live out? Like, did you like that summer go do it all, or is this over a couple of years you did this? How did you actually live that out?
Definitely over a couple of years.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good.
That first summer, it was kind of, I did a level one. I remember did it on Long Island. Um, and then it was just kind of reading articles. And then that time, I'm also trying to apply for jobs, trying to see if I even get a coaching job.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of, I want to say kind of every 2 to 3 years, I would do kind of a major kind of
Mhm.
coaching development. So I would do something. Plus, I was paying for this all out of pocket, so I couldn't do it all at once too.
Yeah.
Um, so every 2 or 3 years, I would do kind of a major coaching development, coaching education. So it kind of gave me some time to digest it and kind of
Yep.
see if I could implement it, and then
Bingo.
try and make it a step further. So it definitely wasn't all at once, but he like I said, he was very excited about coaching, just getting started, and excited that I was kind of admiring what he was doing and wanted to
Mhm.
follow in his footsteps. So he was someone that really kind of pushed me and guided me in the right direction. And but yeah, it's been over years, and still to this day, I was talking to him a couple weeks ago, and we were just I feel bad every time I talk to him. We're usually just talking about workouts and training, and I always have to stop myself. I was like, let's
How
just
are
have some fun,
you doing? Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we've remained close. We were both in each other's weddings, so we're
Oh, sweet.
best friends.
That's awesome. That's the power of the sport right there. I love that. Yeah, I asked that because I could see his exuberance of like, oh, okay, you want to do this? Awesome. Here's what I've done. Go do this, blah, 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 read and things like that. And we tend to do, I don't know if it must be human nature. We tend to do that with a lot of things, whether it's hobbies or jobs. We find something that maybe we finally find something we want to do, or maybe even younger, we get interest in something and then we just dive in, and it's easy to, one, you start maybe having some imposter syndrome of like, well, there's so much to learn. I'll never learn it all. And that is true. The goal is not to learn it all. The goal is to learn, and continue to be a learner. So, I just wondered, like, did you just dive all in, and like, how does that make you feel? Or have you spaced it out and continue to know that, hey, there's still a lot to learn out there, and I continue to do it. And that's what it sounds like, is the latter for you. It's like, yep, I continue to do it and continue learning on how to coach.
There's definitely some times where I did a deep dive, but like I said, early on, it was kind of the financial end that kind of held me back a little bit. Because the first couple, courses and specialist courses I paid out of pocket. And just said, I was like, this is just what I just thinking of it as an investment, right? But then there were times like COVID, like I had nothing to do. So I did as much as I possibly could during that time. But there are some spurts where I'll get really excited about stuff and I'll forget to eat,
Hey, you know what? That is one thing I have not experienced where I've forgotten to eat. I'm always doing things and like, well, okay, when do I eat? It's always spaced out that way. Do you remember as an athlete? There you are. Do you remember as an athlete when you kind of decided, okay, I want to be a coach? Probably first started out, maybe I think I want to be a coach. Okay, maybe this is it. And then, eventually it becomes a solidified, I want to be a coach. Do you remember athlete Brendan, like when you would go to that practice? It's usually not a cut and dry, but let's just, for example, say cut and dry. Monday, I don't know what I really want to do. Tuesday, I know I want to be a coach. Monday practice for Brendan typically is, I just do what coach tells me to do. Did you notice any change in your mindset of like how you were paying attention to what coach was saying? Like, oh, coach, for a high jumper, we did box jumps and we did this many sets and reps. I wonder why we did that. And then the next day we didn't do that, but we did accelerate. Like, why did we do that? Why are we away from the high jump pit? Did you notice yourself starting to get curious about why we're doing the workouts, not just, okay, athlete, go do workout?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the first things that I remember I started doing is it was like every day my coach in the locker room, he would staple up the plan for the day. I remember at the end of the day, I would start taking them and keeping them with me. And I probably, if I looked hard enough, I could probably find the folder of just all
cool.
The workouts and stuff. Cause like you said, it would just, coach would tell me to do it and I would go do it.
Yeah.
Didn't really think anything else of it. And now I'm like trying to have something to reference to and kind of look back, knowing that, 6 months, 6 months from now, a year from now, I'm going to be on the opposite end of it and kind of want to know what I'm doing. So started collecting that. And like I said, I had my friend Chris, he was someone I was kind of more directly coaching me. So I knew I would always have him to kind of, bounce ideas off of, or kind of ask, am I even remotely going in the right direction with what I'm doing here? So that was definitely, I was starting to paying attention to what we were doing. And I started to ask a few more questions and trying to figure out like what the method behind the madness of what was going on.
We learned a fairly valuable lesson, I think, way back with Cameron Babb. He's the head coach of Washburn University in Kansas. And he was a decathlete and went into coaching. And what we kind of learned was, as an athlete, to be an athlete, whether you're trying to be Olympian gold medalist or just trying to be on the team, it's a very selfish pursuit. And what I mean by that, and that's not a bad thing, what I mean by that is when coach tells you do this, you're internalizing, okay, how I do this, when I do this, etc., will make me better in my event. It's a selfish. It's like, how does it improve me? Coaching in that aspect of learning and getting better is a selfless. You're inputting what you've learned from Boucher Snyder, an article you read, what coach is telling me. Now you're inputting it in like, okay, now how do I get it out of me to help an athlete? So it's not, how do I become a better high jumper when I'm a coach? It's how do I take what I just learned and now go make my high jumpers better? So that's why I always ask when you go from like, oh, I don't know what I want to be to, oh, I want to be a coach. Now you look at those workouts differently. Now, instead of the box jumps, because that'll make me a better jumper, it's like, oh, why are we doing those box jumps? Because you're starting to collect data of what I might do for future athletes that might be under my tutelage out there. So it's really important that difference of selfishness to selflessness that comes from athlete over to coach. Go through senior year, you finally found what has probably been a path for you. You find coaching. What did you end up getting your degree in?
Environmental studies.
Of course, because that's when we think about traditionally becoming a track coach, we always recommend you go become an environmental studies. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so it was, I mean, it was like I said, like we were saying before, if I change a different major, maybe I would have not wanted to get into coaching. So whatever I did worked. Did a lot of really cool stuff, but I used my degree for about maybe a summer.
Hmm.
And then I went on to get my master's in coaching. So then that's when you saw like, maybe low 3.0, high 2.0 GPA to 4.0 GPA switch, just because started caring about it a little bit more. But yeah, graduated environmental studies,
Yeah.
did some cool stuff, but so kind of same thing. And I bring that up with my recruits as well, is that it's okay if you don't know what to do. Like I was an environmental studies major and now I coach collegiate track and field,
Right. Yeah.
and it's
I,
at the end of the day,
I love that, because if we were to talk to 14-year-olds ourselves and they say, I want to be a track coach, you'd probably, oh, well, then you probably need to go major in biomechanics or physics, or, maybe most certainly, or at the least, you need to go study physical education teacher type of thing. That's probably how we'd recommend it. We'd rarely recommend to a kid, hey, yeah, go be an environmental studies major, or print journalism, public relations. We probably wouldn't recommend that at all, but yet those paths can lead to not only coaching, but coaching at a very high level as well. So I love that story. That's what part of this podcast is to show someone right now. We have a fairly young audience that listens as well. So there's plenty of athletes that listen, and there's probably someone listening right now thinking, oh, I can't be a track coach. I'm a math major. What do you mean that I'm not a biomechanics, et cetera, biology? I'm not that. I can't be a track coach. And they learn from people like you, like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't necessarily limit me, because of the great coaching education that we have, in my opinion, that you can go on to become, not only become a track coach, but become a really highly successful track coach. So that's really cool. I love that you're environmental studies and not biology or whatnot, traditional track coach. So where do you begin? You graduate with environmental studies. You now feel like you have a path. What's the first step to going down that coaching path?
so that summer I ended up taking a level 1 with USATF, and that was kind of like my first intro to coaching education.
Mm-hmm.
And no, yeah, I agree. I feel like,
how did you, sorry, I want to interrupt. Do you remember who your teachers were, and how did you like that? Meaning you came from a jumps background, high school through, and you did some running, of course, but level 1, which is awesome, by the way. If you're thinking about doing level 1, I highly recommend. I didn't have USTFCA courses when I was growing up through coaching, but those are awesome too. But I had the USATF ones, and they're really fundamental, so I really do recommend them. But they're tough, at least when I did. Maybe it's changed. You tell me. Level 1, I remember being, you start Friday afternoon, you go all the way through Sunday, and it's every event. There's a block of distance, there's a block of throwing, and it can be a little, typically we go because we want to be a jumps coach, but I got to sit through some distance guys or some throws guys or whatnot, and it can be a little tough. How did you deal with the variety in a very short, compact amount of time?
yeah, no, I cannot. For some reason, that's the only, probably, maybe just because it was so long ago, that was probably the only coaching education that I can't remember who the instructors were. I did make the switch from USATF to USTF CCCA immediately after. Yeah, the two went kind of more booze boat. But yeah, no, I think I kind of went into it like trying to, because there's definitely, I remember some people in the courses that were very heavily like, distance runner. I'm here to focus on the distance, I remember leaving and going to my car after the last day, and one of the guys was kind of like, "Oh, that was kind of a waste. Like, I wanted to really learn about the X and O's of distance running and we're learning about everything else." And I was like,
Hmm.
that was awesome. Like, I don't know what you're talking about." And
Probably one
I
of the
kind of,
most common statements is that right there. Oh, what a waste of time. I wanted to go deeper into X, Y, and Z. It's like, bro, this is level one. You're going to get
yeah.
a little bit. You're going to get a good amount of everything, though, but not deep. That's what level two, et cetera, is for. That's number one. I taught a 30 something level one. So I had to deal with that question, that comment all the time.
I think I just with any professional development, even if I've heard the same stuff a million times, I'm sure there's at least something I can pull out of it
Mhm.
that's beneficial. So even if we're talking because at the time, same thing, very I guess not misguided, but kind of just oblivious of what real life was like. I just assumed I was immediately gonna go into the field and only be a high jump coach for the rest of my life. Like I thought that, and I found out very quickly that does not exist. Uh,
Interesting. Yeah.
So I was thinking like, I could probably, there's got to be some type of commonalities through all of these that I can pull from.
Hmm.
So that was kind of the mentality I went to. And, I was so excited to get started that I loved every second of it. Um, but yeah, did that. And I enjoyed it. I know there was a coach from Army at the time. He's the only guy I can remember. I can remember his face. I can't remember his name. Um, and then just start applying for, I remember I had a job interview the drive home from that course. Like I was just applying to as many jobs as I could, jobs I had no business applying to. And um, the only, and again, very grateful. And it was kind of, thinking about another moment where if I did not get this opportunity, where would I have just given up or would I have gone to coach high school? But the only person, and it was very fortunate too because it was close to home. The only person that gave me a chance was where I started was at the United States Coast Guard Academy with head coach Ethan Brown. He gave me
Ethan,
my
yeah.
very first shot and very first opportunity, and became another very first mentor that to this day I haven't coached with him in um, 6 or going on 7 years now, but we're still remain pretty close and
Mm.
talk all the time. But super grateful for him because I had no other oh, no other
Mhm.
no jobs lined up outside of him. So it was great.
So you go to the Coast Guard. How many years were you there?
I was there for 4 years.
What's it like? I don't know much about the Coast Guard Academy. I know less about the Coast Guard Academy than I do like USA, the Air Force Academy, Army, Naval Academy. Yeah, I know a little bit about those. I don't know much about the Coast Guard Academy. What's it like coaching there? What kind of kids go to the Coast Guard Academy? Tell us about that.
So yeah, it's very similar to all the other military academies. The only difference with Coast Guard is they're Division 3 versus
Mhm.
the other three military academies are Division 1. And it's definitely a very different type of type of kid that you're working with. Very regimented, very dedicated. Um, I remember there was times when I was coaching someone and they looked at me and they said, "Coach, that's the opposite of anything I've ever been told before, but I'll try it." So it's like you're working with those kind of kids that will kind of do whatever, and
Wow.
they so it was funny. It's always the first years you get a lot of yes sirs, no sirs, and then after a couple of months those go away. But it was a great group, and like I said, I was there for 4 years, and it's the same coaching staff that was there when I was there, so a lot of consistency with them, and um, it was definitely hard leaving. That was the first program that I had left, um, so it was hard leaving a group like that. But I love my time there, and if I could have stayed, I would have.
So you're there for 4 years and coach just the high jump, right?
No, so I that's what I thought, and I showed up. I had one high jumper, I think six pole vaulters, and maybe like two long and triple jumpers. And pole vault was an event that I
Of
I would
course. Yeah, yeah.
never thought I would get into.
What do you
Uh,
do?
so we actually had that first year. and Ethan was really good about this too. He was always promoting me, just try and learn as much as I could and do as much as I could. So I remember my first year, he encouraged me to go to, there was a local pole vault club nearby, and I would just sit in on practice and just kind of watch what they were doing, and kind of I would take notes um, of the things the coaches were saying.
Mhm.
And then we had also brought in a volunteer to work with the vaulters that year. And I just kind of hung around practice and just kind of watched what they were doing, listened to what they were talking about, just trying to find common ground for what I was looking at. So I would train them or kind of facilitate their practices, and then they would move off technical days, kind of work with the vault stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so that was my first year. And then the second year, um, Ethan just threw me right into it. He said, "You're coaching the vault now. You're coaching all the jumps now." And I am extremely grateful for him for doing that to me. Kind of threw me right into the fire.
Doing
And
that
he's
to
like,
me.
yeah. And now the vault's one of my, I love coaching the vault,
Yeah.
and pole vault community is kind of interesting, where I feel like it's one of those two where if you weren't a vaulter, you kind of get some weird looks like, what, how are you going to coach in the vault? You know what you're doing. So, and the competitive, and I feel like I was just as competitive and still am as a coach as I was as an athlete. So when I would hear that, I'm like, oh yeah, watch me become the best pole vault coach that you've ever
Yeah.
had. So, um, same time of thing. That was when I did a deep dive into a lot of, I bought every coaching DVD that I could on the pole vault, all the articles I could watch and try to implement it. And one of the big things that I did, and just trying to find commonalities between what I was doing with all. So I pretty much coach all, and I still do
Hmm.
it today. I coach all the jumpers the same. And then when it's time to do technical stuff, we'll split off, and trying to just kind of stick to the basics of it, and
Mhm.
getting faster, being more explosive, being more athletic. And obviously the technical stuff came as the years went on. Um, so, and Ethan was great with that too. And he would always, even once I got in a rhythm with all that, he would always tell me, was when your practice was over, I want you to come over to the throw circle. I want you to come over down hurdles,
Hmm.
and I want you to just watch and see what's going on. Because and and from that, I always try and have that, I guess, as my mentality. Whereas there's it's like every couple years I'm trying to add a new event to my repertoire after that, where I went on, obviously getting all the jumping events under my belt, and now I'm thinking about hurdles, I'm thinking about sprints, and now I'm thinking about throws and coaching the multis, um, and just trying to be more of a multi-tool, I guess.
Did you, the pole vault is a unique event. It's one of those where like people hang on the pole vault for a long time. Like there's a lot more masters vaulters than I think there are masters throwers that who originated that. Did you, as you've gone through and, obviously have, picked up the vault as a coach, like you're maybe you're a real vault coach now. But have you actually tried it? Like, have you like, oh, let me see what this feels like.
There were two practices I jumped in and attempted.
How'd it go?
Um, it was fine. It was, I think I jumped maybe, I think I was 9 feet, was a 9 foot
Yeah.
bungee was
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
good,
Okay.
but it was all right. It was fine. But it was
Yeah.
just kind of, especially the first couple of years, like um trying to have fun and kind of showing them what they were doing, and
Yeah.
show them how much I bought into it. Like they and I was, and especially my first couple of years, they that group knew kind of my background, and I was upfront and honest. I wasn't trying to fake it and
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of
No.
tell them. And I was like, look, like I'm figuring this out as we go, and like we're gonna learn together and do it, and
Yeah. No, what I was getting at was the vault is just a unique event. It calls a lot of people out of curiosity. If you were to have gone and coached the hurdles, and you would have told me like, yeah, but I've never actually gone over a hurdle, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, we're like, oh yeah, of course, it's hurdles, man. You can kill yourself, When you say, yeah, I had to learn how to coach the vault, I'm immediately like, oh, I've heard this story before. You went and tried to do it, right? I mean, come on, like everybody wants to be like, well, what's it feel like, So, um, what I'm curious about is, and we recently had Brett Halter, head coach at University of Mizzou, on, who has become, arguably one of the top throws coaches around, and he was a distance runner by trade all through high school and college. And so I'll ask you the same question I asked him. And you're still early-esque in your coaching career, meaning, you've got a long runway ahead of you here, bub. You're young in here. Do you think, at least at this point in your career, not doing the pole vault as an athlete has helped you become a good pole vault coach? Or do you feel a little bit of a hindrance because you don't know how it feels, right? Like, you have not physically gone through the motions to jump 12, 13, 14 or higher feet. Do you think at this point in your career it's helped you? Because there can be some positives from that, or is it more hindering you as a vault coach, not participating in it as an athlete?
I would say probably maybe in those first couple years, like it was tough. I feel like it was tough um to get buy-in. Not necessarily get buy-in, but sometimes with some athletes it'd be tough to get
Because
buy-in.
you're not part of the club. Because
Exactly.
it is a club. I mean, the pole vault is a very unique event. I mean, more unique than any distance event, throws event, etc. It is a very unique event. So you found yourself maybe having a little bit more air quotes here, prove yourself. You're like, yeah, okay, Brennan, you're not a vaulter. How are you going to tell me?
But I think it's kind of like where I had to go from it with myself trying to figure it out, had to go from a bit more of a developmental kind of mindset
Oh yeah.
where I'm trying to teach myself from square one,
Mm.
like how is this supposed to look? How is this supposed to go? How is this supposed to feel? And sometimes, yes, trying to test it out and kind of do different drills and different things. And um, it wasn't always pretty, but um, at least trying to, in my head, try and feel it out and even kind of go through the motions, just kind of standing there. And I would also ask questions. I feel like even I've always been more of a cooperative style in my coaching,
Hmm.
where I feel like even to today, like when someone's coming off a jump or coming off anything, before I'm even telling them what happened, I'm asking, trying to get feedback from them, and usually how did that feel,
Hmm.
and so I ask a lot of those questions a lot through practice and what does it feel like that? And I was like, do you feel like you can get into this position? What are the challenges of getting into this position?
Hmm.
Um, and just I guess asking more questions
Hmm.
because I couldn't necessarily feel it all the time or haven't
Yeah.
felt it or knew what it was like. So trying to go, you know, my pole vault age was at the infant stage and trying to figure it out from a baby. And I felt like the more that I could understand it from that sense is that as I built onto it and over the years, I can almost tell you exactly how it felt,
Hmm.
because I've gone through every different kind of level of it. And obviously there's always things that I'm still not sure about, and I was a high jumper, I'm still not sure about things with the high jump,
Hmm.
and just kind of look at that. And with like I said, with my high school coach, and he was the throws guy and probably one of the best high jump coaches I ever had,
Right, right.
and kind of looking at that with that mentality. And same thing. I feel like I keep saying that I'm going back to like during
Mhm.
recruiting. It's like in the recruiting state, especially I feel like with a lot of the technical events, more so in Connecticut where we are, or the Northeast, there's not many technical coaches in the
Mhm.
high school realm. So a lot of times when I'm recruiting someone, either their parent or them will say it's like, yeah, like I have a coach, but they're more of a distance person, so I'm kind of teaching myself and don't really know what to do. So I'm excited when I get here. And I was like, so, and I feel like now I've and always kind of jump into the defense of those high school coaches. Like, look, that one
Mhm.
person is probably coaching 115 other people.
Yep.
Like, you're lucky, and they're working a full-time job on top of that. You're lucky they're even there.
Amen.
First of all, and then I tell him, I was like, my jumps coach was a throws guy, and he by just investing time, he did that with
Yeah.
me. And I remember Boo saying something similar where it was one of his athletes like saying you know, uh, like, oh, coach, everything you're doing is great. Like my high school coach didn't know what they were talking about. Like I'm
Mm.
getting so much better working with you. And he got on them immediately saying like, your high school coach got you here. I was like, seems like they did a pretty good job. So trying to always kind of remind the everyone
Thank,
that is.
thank God we don't have to do the event to coach it. And, you could easily say, thank God we don't have to be really, really good at the event to become a coach in it, right? Um, I hear a lot of people when they didn't do the event and they got to coach it, talk about like, yeah, I don't know how it felt. So I have to ask a lot. Like, and you were saying like, how did that feel? But I don't have any of the bad habits either. That's always the caveat. It's like, well, I didn't grow up, learn the bad habits. I like your take on it. It's like, oh yeah, since I didn't know how it felt, I just have to ask a lot more questions. How did it feel? What did you try to do here? And I think that's like a super positive, because a lot of times we can get into where we know how to coach the event. And so we stop asking questions and start barking out more orders. I think staying curious and having to ask questions, I think that's an asset. That'll be something that you'll have to work on as you continue to increase your competence. You'll become a master level pole vault coach here, at some point in time. But do you still ask the questions? Do you still ask because, and you've seen this, the basics of any event is like the most important part. We're always searching, for the 1%, but if you do the 99% really, really good, you could be an Olympian just for that alone. Right. So as you become a better and better coach and stack that knowledge throughout the years, that'll be the real trick for you. Will be, oh, do I stay curious? Do I stay? I know a lot of things, but can I think of a Dan Paff. That guy knows more than anybody. And I don't know of anybody else that asks more questions than Dan Paff. I've seen him work with Steve Lewis, an Olympian, and I was watching it with Steve, and he's just asking Steve all these questions. And I'm like, Dan, you know these. What does he ask? What are you talking about, Dan? You know these things. And it's like, oh, he's got to know what his athlete is thinking and feeling and seeing, and then the myriad of other things that go on just beyond technique and all that with your athletes. So I think it's a cool perspective that you got there. I really do.
I think it's because especially now, like even a lot of times I'll know the answer. And I'm trying to make sure that they understand it. So if I'm asking them, and like I know what happened or what maybe the technical fall was, and I want to make sure that they know it. So sometimes I've even just asking them, kind of quizzing them. Because like I said, as I approach coaching, I very much try and approach it as teaching. And so like whenever we're doing something, I try not to take up too much practice time, because all my athletes know that I can just get on tangents and just ramble and ramble and ramble. So I try not to take up too much time, but at least let them make sure they understand why we're doing what we're doing. So that when we get into competition or when we're starting jumping, they can kind of problem solve as they go. And I kind of let them know, as we go up in the ranks, maybe we start qualifying for bigger and bigger meets, going to national championships. You might not be able to talk to me. Like you might not be able to get that feedback. Like I might not be able to be in there. Or what happens a lot with me, because I'm coaching all the events and some of the throwing events, I'm running around like a chicken with their head cut off. So sometimes they have to problem solve and kind of use each other to be able to figure out what's going on.
I have seen that where the coach, through how they coach their athlete, the athlete doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to tie their shoe without coach telling them how to tie their shoe. And that's called learned helplessness, by the way. It's not just a coach athlete thing. It's a societal thing, but it's a learned helplessness. And I can honestly say, I believe I would say I've seen it more in the pole vault than any other event. Maybe, honestly, this is tough to say to all my pole vaulters out there, maybe more than all the other events combined. Now I spend more time in the pole vault because we're a pole vault company. So maybe that's why I see that, but I see that I'm reminded of one of the greatest coaches in the pole vault and the greatest people that I've hung around and watched coach is Earl Bell. And I remember one of the first times I saw Earl Bell coach, like at a US champs or Olympic trials. And there were some coaches that were, after each attempt, 100 things. And I remember Earl Bell, I think it was with like Derek Miles. Derek made a bar and Derek looks at him and Earl says, "How'd that feel?" Derek said whatever. And he goes, all right, do it again. It was like, that was it. Or, he said, all right, well, maybe step back half a foot. I mean, it was like one very generic command, go up 2 inches on the pole, or what, that pole, go to the 75. I mean, just like, you're just repeating the same motion over and over, just the bar gets higher. So you got to do little things here, not rework the entire, if you haven't done the work 365 days, you can't do it on the one day of the meet. And I just remember being floored. I'm watching Earl Bell coach probably 7 or 8 of the kids, and 3 to 4 of them are going to make the Olympic team. And it's like, wow, like this guy, he gets it. Like, he knows I can't overload the athlete. Like, it's got to be simplicity. And to your point, Earl may not be able to make a meet, or God forbid Earl gets sick, or the way the facility is laid out, you can't get close to the athlete. Athlete still has to perform. Have you done it right in practice, and your posture towards an athlete, that they know they'd love to have you and they'd love to have feedback, but you know what? If coach ain't around, well, I have to have some self-ownership of my events and make corrections along the way too. That learned helplessness, man. It's a real boogaboo, man. It's not a good thing. And I think it's easy for us as coaches to do and feel like we're doing it right, by the way.
Yeah. And like, I like them to have a little ownership of what they're doing as well. And
E.
sometimes we'll be at a meet, and I'll say, you got two options. You can either do this. I would suggest either doing this or this. What would you rather do? And then just let them kind of go with it, and
I like that
'cause-
options thing. Yeah.
And most of the time they pick the one that I wanted to do
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
So usually I'm just like, good choice. And then I just walk away.
But it gives them
But
ownership. I
Right.
love that. One of the things that we do here, non-track wise here in the private sector is, when someone will come up and they have a question of whatever, and it's easy as the manager, as the coach, to just give them the answer, right? It's like, oh, I'm doing 100 other things, just give them the answer and let them go, right? But there's no growth in that. So one of my favorite questions to ask when they come and ask a question is, hey, if I weren't here today, what would you do? Oh, okay. Well, I'd probably do X, Y, Z. And if it's the right thing, it's like, cool, go try it. If it's not, if it's like, whoa, okay, hold on, there's a coaching moment here. And it's like, okay, well, then we start talking out. Well, what do you think that might solicit? What might the feedback come from that? And we kind of talk it through. But now when they walk away and I'm not there next time and a situation similar as shows up, they have the experience of it, not just Mike barking out orders. Same thing with the coach. You give them the options, or you say, hey, what would you do if I weren't here? They start having that ownership. Now, when and if that time comes up, because it's going to happen. I mean, there's going to be some meet where you're just not able to talk to your athlete the way you want to talk to your athlete. To your point, maybe you're coaching 100 other things and you're out, or you're sick or something. They need to have the ownership and still achieve success at a high level. So I think learned helplessness is a thing that we should be talking about as coaches, and how do we improve ourselves?
I think a lot of times too, especially at the bigger, championships,
which exists now.
Yes. Once I got into coaching, everything flipped. I was like, this is where we're going. But I agree, kind of culture shift where it's like, this is a thing. And I was watching, other coaches bring their athletes there, and I was like, I want to do that. We're going to go do that. But especially in a meet like that, where at the end of the season, there's not much more that I can do to kind of help you. It's I'm messing you up more than me talking to you, for 5 minutes in between your jumps. Right. Is messing you up more than you just going. We had a woman, she's a sophomore now, but last year, first year high jumper, she won indoor conference in the high jump, and in a jump off, and then outdoor she was in a jump off again. And she was in her rhythm, and she is a competitor. She just goes. And like, it was phenomenal to watch her jump. And I said something to her that threw her off her rhythm. And after that, she lost the jump off. She would just kind of get up to her mark and just go in immediately. I was like, slow down, take your time. You got plenty of time. Like, why are you rushing? And as soon as she did that, she likely started thinking about more stuff more. Whereas I was thinking, it's like, dang, if I just let her just do her thing, she probably would have been indoor and outdoor champ. But those are the lessons you learn. And
that's easy to kick yourself about there too, because of the specific example. But you have other examples where, I gave the right cue as well, and that made it's tough. We try to black and white this coaching thing, and a lot of times we do it out of judgment of others, where we say, if I'm sure, I hope not, but I would, I'm a betting man. Someone saw that example you just gave there, and she didn't do very well. I'm sure someone on the other side, because they don't know what's going on. They're not, my favorite saying in the whole world from George Williams, formerly of St. Aug's, Gill podcast alum. If you're not in the huddle, you don't know the play. So it's very easy to judge and be like, oh, if she was my athlete, she'd have jumped 6 foot, whatever, because I wouldn't have told her that or whatever. It's like, oh, you have no idea. You have no idea what's going on in that moment. So it's easy to kick ourselves. And that was a learning moment for you for sure. But the other side is where you've given a cue like that and it's worked out perfectly. So we're dealing with humans, right? So there is no black or white instruction. Don't do that or do that. You got to know that athlete. And you know what? The only way you know that athlete is by making the mistake sometimes.
Yeah. If it worked, I would have been a genius.
Yeah, well, we get that too, where sometimes we look up and be like, oh, I'm a genius. I don't know what I did, but
Yeah.
I'm a genius, right? All right, so 4 years at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. That's awesome. I love our academies and the people that coach there. I've heard a lot of great examples from there. You say there were 4 years. Where do we go next and why?
So I was at, yeah, Coast Guard 4 years, had a lot of success. Um, had a national champion in the long jump, and
Wow.
then I fully put all the credit to the coaches association with that one. That was like coming, it was like I did the my first jump specialist course, and then that following year I had a million PRs. We had a national champion, and I remember immediately sending, it was like Todd Lane,
Mm,
Jim Van Ottingen, and Boo. I sent them an email like this course was worth every penny. Like, thank
that's
you so much.
awesome. I love that.
Um, and so I did another year following that. And so when I was there, like I said, I love my time there. But I was making 5 grand a year. So I was doing that and um, working um, as a paraprofessional in the same middle school that I went to. So I started like substitute. Yeah, it was all the same teachers. It was funny. So I started substitute teaching, and then the principal was a former teacher of mine at the high school, and he said, he's like, "Hey, do you want to just like, you connect well with all the kids? Do you want to just stay and just be, instead of just subbing, stay and be a permanent part of the staff?" And I was like, yeah, definitely, because subbing was great where it's like, it was, I'd make maybe like $100 a day. And then if I didn't want to work the next day, I didn't have to, so that was kind of nice where,
Mhm.
um, but I did need to make more of a grown-up decision, have a little more consistency. So I was doing that. And, uh, that's when I realized that I did not want to teach, especially not in the middle school age.
Mhm.
Um, where it was like, you know, I need to make a change here or else I'm not going to be able to survive
Mhm.
um, another year doing, working. It was just a lot of stress that I didn't want to deal with anymore. So,
But but
um,
but are you? It's always interesting to me. Like I think grad assistants, stay with me. Grad assistants, I think more grad assistants should not go into coaching. And what I mean by that is it should be like this testing for you, almost like an internship, right? To where you think you want to be a coach. So you go in, you become a grad assistant and you realize, oh, nope, that's not it. But thank God I studied X, Y, and Z. I can go in this profession. At this point, so you do 4 years at Coast Guard Academy. That's a commitment. Then you're doing this. Think about your time there. Are you committed? I am going to be a track coach, or is there any part, even if it's 1% of like, all right, well, I can still go, I can be a middle school teacher, or I could, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, are you fully like, this is my identity, I'm going to be a track coach, or is there any part still of like, well, I could still, you're a very talented individual. I can go over here and do this.
no, I was all in. I
You're
was all
in.
in the coaching. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was, I think my third year, I started doing a master's program. I did online in coaching and sports coaching. Um, so I didn't really do the traditional grad assistant route, which
Mm-hmm.
probably would have saved me some money and maybe put me on a different path. But same thing. I love where I ended up, so
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't want to change it. And during the time, my coach was always reaching out and is like, "Hey, would do you want to come and be a GA for us?" And I was like, "Well, one, I need like I need to work too. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
gonna be able to do that." And I didn't really like the idea of going back to my alma mater, and coaching my teammates. Like I didn't really feel like I was going to get buy-in. They were like, I didn't think my coach was going to look at me the same,
I
was
think
going
it,
to stay look at the same.
I think it should be illegal. I'm dead serious. I've said this several times. I think it should be, I guess not illegal. Like illegal means you go to jail, right? So not illegal. I think it should be against the NCAA, NAI, all the college rules that you cannot GA at the same alma mater, especially if there's no years removed. I still don't understand. And we've had people on the podcast that have, carefully chosen their words of like, yeah, maybe I didn't handle that transition very well. I don't understand how you can go from, my term is being boys with them on Friday. You're on the team, you're playing Xbox, doing your thing. You're senior, so maybe you're having a drink or two, whatever. And then on Monday, and I know that's, fall semester or whatever, your coach. I I don't know. That seems because you're dealing with 22 year. I mean, you're not. If you're a senior and you're 22, I would still call you a 22-year-old kid because you're on the team. Just because you're a 22-year-old now grad student, I don't know that you're an adult. I just don't know. I'm not sure that should be legal. I'm not sure that's ever worked out properly, separation. I'm glad you had some self-awareness of like, yeah, you're calling it buy-in. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure. I was just on the team with these guys and gals. Really? Now they're going to listen. I'm Coach Wilkins now just because
Yeah.
I'm in a different role. I'm not sure. You had some good self-awareness there.
Yeah, I had my biggest fear was that, I was still going to be looked at as an athlete by the coaching staff and maybe not
Mm-hmm.
get, I wouldn't have got the freedom that I got at Coast Guard and how Ethan just threw me into things. Like
Right.
I don't think I would have got that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, no, I was and I experienced it too because we did have that, the same grad assistant I was talking to. He was a teammate of mine.
Right.
He was on my recruiting visit. I've known him for so long, and there were definitely times I was close with him, so I was never disrespectful with him at all, and I respected him a lot. But there's definitely the talks amongst the team, like
Mm-hmm.
people saying it's like, oh, like how is he going to tell me not to do this when I was just with him doing that,
Doing
a
it
month
right.
ago. So
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
I was really afraid of that. And then even like I had athletes that and further on the years that wanted to get a coaching and they wanted to be a grad assistant for us. And I was like, look, I don't think this is a good idea. Like I would not suggest doing this. If you want to do it, you can, if you want to help out, but I would recommend trying to get started somewhere else for a little bit so that 'cause I was like, they're just not going to listen to what you're saying,
Mhm.
and but so no, that's sorry, I lost my train of thought, but
So you finish up Coast Guard Academy, you're doing the para thing. What's where oh you gotta go, you start doing some master's classes to get a degree.
yeah, so I knew I wanted to be done. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to spend 4 years and be done. So it was a program where you basically had 16 weeks to get the class done. And I was getting the classes done in like 8 weeks and sometimes 5 weeks. So I was like just trying to get it done and with quality as well. Um, but I wanted to be done after my fourth year because that's when I knew that I wanted to take that next step. And my coach had always recommended getting a master's degree because he's like, then like you could be able to teach classes and that's a little extra money and stuff. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Um, Looking back now, maybe I didn't need to get the master's degree, but glad I have it. Um, so there was an opening at Springfield College, which is in the same, it's in the NUMAC conference, that
Mm-hmm.
same as Coast Guard. Um, Ethan is a Springfield alum, so I had gotten to know, and the head coach at the time had just came into that role not too long ago. He was an alum, and I had known him that because Ethan had introduced me when he was at another school. He became the head coach, um, and they were going to have a assistant role, and I just went up to him. They hosted a meeting with there, and I went up to him and I was like, I heard you are having an opening. I'm very interested. Like I'll do whatever. Like I was I'm taking, like I'm finishing my master's degree. I'm taking another specialist course. Like I'm like just I basically like verbalizing my resume.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and he knew who I was just because of being around. And um, so there's that. Over the summer, like again, I did this another specialist course, and again, it was like one of my only options. It was like I'm either going to go do this or I'm going to stay at Coast Guard and love my time at Coast Guard, but be miserable working at the middle school.
Mm.
Um, and I was fortunate to get the position at Springfield, and I'll say again, I love my time at Springfield, and I'll say that's my time there is what really kind of changed my perception on coaching and kind of really changed me as a coach to get me where I am today. So
How
is
so?
so well, first it was definitely a big adjustment going from a military academy to a private college.
Sure.
Just the mentality of the athletes where, you know, my athletes' biggest problem is that they weren't getting enough sleep. Like they had to study for all these, military exams. They had drill 6 a.m. where um went to Springfield and now I'm dealing with a lot more um emotions, I guess I'd say.
Mm.
Um I remember someone asked me what has been the difference going to Springfield, and I was like, I feel like I'm drowning in tears compared to Coast Guard. It was just a different um I just feel like a different mindset athlete, but
A different kid goes to a military academy versus any other school. But even to your point about a private school, I think a different kid might go to a private school than a public school, but certainly and someone who's up for an academy spot is a little different. Not judging good or bad either way, but they are different. I would agree with that.
And I think I was I feel like I've gone through different phases with every program that I've been with. Whereas my first 4 years coaching at the Coast Guard Academy, I made the same mistake all first year coaches make and want to be best friends with, want to be buddies with everyone they're coaching with. And it was great. And luckily I was at a spot where they were going to be respectful no matter what. Um, and then when I went to Springfield, I was like, there's going to be the hardest line drawn in the sand. Like I'm not, and kind of taking over a little bit of the military side of it. I was like, it's going to be very direct and I'm going to hold these
Mm.
kids accountable. And so is that. And um, it obviously wasn't taken on well right away. And I kind of had to transition. Um, but I would say kind of the main reason I say that is, so my first year, they had brought in a very talented woman high jumper. She came in right away. We qualified for national championships. She broke the school record, extremely talented. Um, and as the season was going on, you could start seeing kind of her the mental side of her career start to play out, where she
Mm.
was dealing with a lot of performance anxiety and kind of having these expectations and dealing with a lot of different things that it was way out of my wheelhouse
Mm.
at the time. So she was having a successful career really, really quickly, and we went to the indoor national championships, and she just absolutely just crumbled. Had the
Mm.
worst meet of her life, and I think she cried for about like 2 weeks because she did so bad. Um, and at the time, Ethan was there and he's like, I want to see, you have athletes there. I'm going to come watch them while they're going. So he came and watched, and also being in a love of the school, he came and watched her high jump. And um, after I just kind of went up and I was like, that was rough. Like she is not doing well. And first thing he said, he was like, I think you should read this book. And it was called The Upside of Stress. And like I said, before that moment, I was not a good student. I never read. And from that moment, just as soon as I read that book, um, and same thing, it kind of goes back to, I guess, purpose behind it and having a purpose and a passion through it. So I read that book and it completely changed the trajectory of my career and really started getting taking a deep dive in kind of sports psychology and kind of the mental side and the mental aspect of coaching and of track and field and of athletics. And um, that year alone, I probably read more books than I had read in my entire life, and it still the same way to today.
A lot of people, readers, are generally always have their ears open for book recommendations. So a certain segment of our listenership just was like, what was that book? So kind of a book recommendation, if you will. So you said The Upside of Stress. And you said, now these are some pretty big words here, Brendan, change the direction of my career. Tell us a little bit about that book. What were some of the maybe themes? Give us like a little mini book report to convince us to go out immediately to our local library and get the Upside of Stress book.
Yeah. This is one of the tangents that you just got me on that it's gonna be another hour of talking about books. But um so yeah, it's called The Upside of Stress by Dr. Kelly McGonigal. She also has a TED Talk where just pretty much goes over all the things. So if you're not a big reader and you want to get the idea of the book, definitely check out our TED Talk. It's awesome. But it's all about um changing the idea of stress and anxiety from a negative thing to a positive thing. So it's all about mindset and kind of changing your mindset to having more of a positive mindset versus a negative mindset. And what she does throughout the book is she talks a lot about having a mindset intervention. So basically breaking it down scientifically what's happening in your body, like what hormones are released when you are experiencing stress or anxiety, and saying it's like these things are being released and these are all the positive things that are happening. The only thing that's changing is the way you're perceiving it, right? It's kind of like a fight or flight, like a challenge versus threat response. Um, so she goes into a deep dive about that, and just even kind of like biologically what's happening throughout your body, right? If you are, you know, having a challenge response, maybe your blood vessels are expanding, or if you're in a threat response, your blood vessels are tightening up, so less blood is going through your body. And she kind of challenges the reader to change their language and change their thoughts on different things, right? That she talks about, like, when you're feeling stress and anxiety, what's happening, right? Your breath starts quickening, and your heart starts pounding. It's like, okay, well, that's your body trying to get more oxygen and more blood throughout your body.
Hmm.
You got butterflies in your stomach. Okay, that means something really matters, and you just got to make them fly in the same direction. Your palms are sweaty. Think about when that happens, right? Your palms get sweaty right before your first date, and it's right before something you really want is about to happen. So
Hmm.
she talks about a lot, and one of the big things that I've taken and I use throughout all of it is trying to say, and even catching yourself, like, it's like, oh, I'm so nervous about this. It's like, no, you're not nervous. You're excited. So trying to have
Hmm.
that mentality with everything. So, and kind of catching yourself. And the more and more you kind of convince yourself you're in that, it kind of changes the whole trajectory. And so I have weekly meetings with our whole team, and I call them like championship meetings, and we'll talk about different aspects of mindset. And one that I'll always do is, with all my first years, I have them kind of model and kind of walk through the group. And it's like, okay, I want you to walk through the circle that we're in right now, like you have to go to practice. And they're all kind of like hunched over like that. And it's like, okay, now I want you to walk like you get to go to practice. And they're immediately like all stood. And it's
Hmm.
like, to think about that, just one word completely changed everything. It's like, before you had to go run 6 200s, now you get to run 6 200s because this is going to get us set up to go. So that was kind of the big theme of the book. And she
Hmm.
would go through, even like talking about like, uh, maids in a hotel, like talking about how since they're working so many hours, they feel like they can't exercise. So in the break room, they would put up posters saying, like, every mattress you flip is equivalent to burning this many calories.
Hmm.
So it's making them feel like, oh, I'm not getting exercise, but I'm doing all this stuff. So like I am getting exercise. So kind of changing their mindset with stuff like that. And it uh it was a super powerful book for me. And I still take a lot from today, and it just kind of domino effect to more and more reading and going into that realm.
But I thought you were going to say how the book changed the direction of your career, how you were able to talk with your athletes, and you gave some great examples there. But I'm also hearing you say how you actually utilize these, I'm gonna call them skill sets, mind changes. Do you think, or maybe you even know, maybe you've asked Ethan, when he recommended that book, do you think he was recommending that book to you because, oh, the athlete didn't perform very well, so here's maybe some things you can learn to help with that, or for you of how to prepare her for, or and future athletes for a stressor event like that, a championship?
I think it was a little bit of both. I
Mm,
think obviously we saw how um, it had affected her, and he had known me for 4 years and could see how I
mm.
was under high pressure situations.
Right.
Um, and so probably a little bit of both.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, it's something that's completely changed my life, and
Mm.
I don't really think I would have survived um, going through the COVID pandemic and not having a
Mm.
season without that, where it's like I kind of changed my mindset where it's like, and I said the same exact thing to my athletes, like, we can either be bitter about this, that our season's over, or we can use this as an opportunity to get better. And I spent the entire time, diving into any professional development I could get my hands on, everyone was doing, their own symposiums over Zoom and listening to all different podcasts and reading. And I said the same thing to my athletes. I was like, look, we're going to be at home for 6 months. We either use the 6 months to get down ourselves, or we can use it to get 6 months ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
So when we get back and we can't compete, we're ready. Um, so it definitely helped me. It was great timing, um, going into that, because it was like a year or two. It was like a year and a half before that happened.
That's interesting. I love the mentorship of Ethan to help you out with that. What struck me was, you had just spent 4 years with him and he never recommended the book to you. And at first I was like, well, what the heck, Ethan? But now what I'm thinking is, mentorship is not a one-time thing. I meet with you on one day and I just blah everything out to you, every book recommendation, every blah, 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 right? It's a long-term thing. And so I think that that book for him to you, it wasn't the right time until that time at nationals when the high jump happened. I think he probably has a lot of things. A guy like that obviously is very conscientious. That guy like that has a lot of help for different situations at different times. So it's interesting that that was the time for that book for him. And right now, that book is going to hit for someone right now. Right now, someone hears that and is Googling it if you're not driving, and says, "Oh, I need to read this or audiobook it or TED Talk it," and it's going to affect their trajectory of their life. Other people are going to hear it and think, "Oh, yeah, maybe." And in 5 years, when something happens, be like, "Oh, wait, I remember a book," and they're either going to call you or come back to this podcast, or they hear it 5 years from now. That's the cool thing about these podcasts, is that these are evergreen. 5 year, we started 5 years ago. You could go right now and listen to the very first podcast we ever did. That's evergreen. It was captured in that time. So 5 years from now, someone hears your journey and hears about that book and says, "Oh, maybe this is what I've been looking for," and it helps them at that point, because we're all in different ages and stages of our life, and our posture of accepting things changes based on the circumstances of our life. So I love that for you and for Ethan at that time, that was the right time to recommend the book, and look what fruit has gained from it. I mean, you've
Oh
gained a
yeah.
lot. It's obvious you've gained a lot from a book, just a simple book. I mean, that's the power of books and reading, I think, is what it can do for you in different circumstances of your life.
Yeah, and then it kind of, inspired, like I said, I just became a lifelong learner and just with
Mm,
everything. And kind of what you said, like thinking about myself as a student, like if someone told me to read something and it didn't really apply or kind of help me become better in what I was doing, I probably wouldn't have read it. But at
mhm.
that point, I was very desperate to find any type of solution to kind of help,
Right.
and I dove right into it. And from then it kind of evolved, where then I started doing, like, during our kind of preseasons, we would put on kind of like um all these kind of like interventions and kind of like almost like mini kind of like TED Talks with like team activities. And then
Mm,
as soon as I got to Quinnipiac, that was like one of the first things I said. I was like, I want to do this. I want to do it every week, and we're going to talk about different things and just give them at least one little tool in their toolbox
mm.
to do it throughout. But yeah, so her and I, it then it kind of went into COVID, and I think that was a good time for all of us, where she kind of ended her first year and the half of her sophomore year very down about track and field and did not want to be doing what she was doing. And I think once it got taken away,
Mm.
she became very grateful for it. I think during that time too, and with the kind of, we can say almost like a mental injury, it turned into kind of like a physical injury as well. And she started having all these knee problems. So it was like
Mm.
a huge storm of things happening. And during COVID, she ended up getting, minor knee surgery as well, and just kind of changing her thought process on things. And when she came back, she was a whole different person. Whereas her senior year basically mirrored her entire first year, except when we got to national champion, she ended up as an All-American. So her senior year, it was like a very full circle moment where her
Yeah.
senior year reflected everything she was doing her first year. And our conversation was just like, let's just rewrite the story. Let's rewrite your career in this
Mm.
moment. We basically went to a lot of the same meets. We did a lot of the same things. She was performing the same way. I was like, just go and have, like, right now, the national championships are a terrible experience for you. Let's go and have a good experience. And we went, and she was very good at it too. And she did a lot of research herself, and she found, techniques and things to do during competition. She ended up becoming a big knitter, and like during meets, she had her meat blanket that she would do in every meet. She would crochet and do that because it would keep her mind off of
Mm.
competition. She wasn't being like isolating herself. Like she would just have her head down. She'd be talking to the other women she was
Mm.
competing with, and just that's how she stayed calm. And I think her senior year, she maybe made like two or three blankets because she was just going like crazy.
Wow.
Um, but that was the thing that kind of helped her
Yeah.
stay in her zone, and we were able to rewrite a whole year from her. And she went from track and field being the worst thing that ever happened to her to, something that she's grateful for. So it was awesome to kind of see that. And we kind of, grateful for her too, because I would not have, same thing, kind of little moments like that, I would not have even thought about like the mental side of it. Where now that's a huge part of my program and what I like to do and how I like to coach. And we learned it together, and we were able to kind of bring it all together for on our senior year.
I like that term, rewrite the story. We don't always get a chance to do that. And so when you get that chance, take advantage of. I like that. Rewrite the story. That's really cool. Do you go from Springfield to Quinnipiac?
Yep. So I spent another 4 years at Springfield. And then it was at convention, the sprints coach. And I don't know, I'm just stuck in all these Springfield alum.
Hey,
So
there's
I
a
got into,
lot. That school has a history in athletics, and I think it's like the birthplace of strength and
basketball.
conditioning, in basketball, strength and conditioning. We had Rob Lasorsa from MF Athletics on the podcast a while back. He's a Springfield alum. He was talking about it's a like little known, air quotes, Springfield College has a big thumbprint on sports, basketball, strength and conditioning. So a
Yeah.
lot of alum from there in our profession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big coaching tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, just deep history in athletics.
Nice.
So gotten to know him. Joe Van Gilder, he's our sprint coach at Quinnipiac Sprints and Hurdle. He's our associate head coach now. But had known him just from hanging around the track and getting introduced to him. And it was at convention. He came up to me, like cornered me, and he's like, "We're gonna have an opening, and I want you to apply for it." So at the time, their mid-distance coach was retiring, and he was coaching sprints, hurdles, jumps, everything by himself. So he's like, I need some help. And even thinking about it now, like I still feel like I'm scrambling trying to get to those. So I can't even imagine
Right.
how he was doing that with on top of it. So with our mid-distance coach, Chris Dickerson, he um, retired. He says he retired, but he's at every single practice still and every single meet. He just doesn't, after practice, he just leaves. So he gets to do all the good stuff and doesn't have to worry about it. And that's what he loves. So they want to kind of change the trajectory of their coaching staff because it's the history of Quinnipiac has always been more of like a distance heavy program. And they wanted to, and the sprints and jumps have been building and bringing a jumps coach into that, another track, speed and power coach into there, would start to develop the track program more so, our sprints and jumps group. So cornered me at convention and same kind of thing. He's like, you got to talk to our head coach. She's here, Carolyn Martin. And I had met her a few times, just same thing, recruiting. It was one of like it was the last time I was in Florida. It was like one of like the coaches' dinner, the coaches' social. And I just remember feeling like I was at like the 8th grade school dance, like just trying to like, make my move and like approach them to shoot my shot. And finally got up the courage to do it on the last day and just kind of like I was like, this is me, this is what I'm about, but like very interested and just kind of went with there. I was still at that time, I was still kind of debating like what I wanted to do and what path I wanted to take. I loved my time at Springfield and all the kids that I was coaching at the time were pretty much all the kids that I had recruited. So it was, and I kind of wanted to see that, that first class through. And it's always been very hard for me to kind of lead programs because I feel like coaching is a people business. And, I very much value the relationships and the impact that I make on people. And I never want to feel like I'm, leaving someone high and dry. And it was, and having conversations with other coaches and my coach and kind of saying, if you stay for the kids, you're never going to leave. And I think Boo said it I think it was on your podcast too, where he was saying is like, why are you worried about, screwing them over when someone better could be coming in? So kind of thought about that and push my ego aside a little bit. And, and same thing, like I started needing to make adult decisions where, take a next step in my career, take a next step, making a little bit more money too. But still at that time I was trying to figure out, like at that point, I was very much thinking I was going to go be trying to apply for Division III head coaching jobs. Like at that point, that was the trajectory, the path that I thought I was going to be taking. And so when I got approached with that, it kind of threw me for a loop a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, it's like, okay, and now that I'm in the role that I'm in, I'm kind of like, I kind of like this role, and like I don't know if I want to be a head coach anymore. So it was cool to have this perspective where at Springfield we had a much bigger team, and we all had very large, like I was coaching 25 athletes by myself
Hmm.
with a grad assistant, and almost felt like I was in kind of a big leadership role and kind
Hmm.
of in a head coach role. I was like, I'm kind of already doing this, let me go into it. And so that's kind of why I was in that. But yeah, so then I ended up making a tough decision. It was hard. Saying goodbye to all those kids and
Hmm.
all those men and women and those athletes that I had been with for 4 years. And but they understood and they knew. A few of them I think they were upset with me, but 98% of them were happy for me, and I still got to see them all the time. Well, not all the time, but got to see them every now and
Hmm.
then and kept in touch and still keep in touch with them all today. Um, but yeah, and then I went over to Quinnipiac.
Yeah, never forget. The majority of those kids are happy for you. You know, two or a couple of those kids are upset at you, like, "Oh, you're leaving us." Never forget. There's always a couple of kids that are glad to see you go. When you're dealing with that
Yes.
many kids, you just it's a fact of life.
Yeah.
Most of them, though, are happy for you. Just think about them, right? U.S. Coast Guard Academy, Division III, Springfield, Division III.
Correct.
Quinnipiac Division One. What have you had to, and you were a Division III athlete. What have you had? How many years at Quinnipiac now?
Starting my third year.
Third, yeah. What have you had to learn? Each division is unique in a lot of different ways. So you're going from Division III to Division One. What has been one of the biggest changes you've had to adjust to? What maybe did you think was going to be easy? It's like, well, actually, this was a little harder. And maybe the reverse. What did you think? It's like, oh man, this might be a little hard for me to learn. And it actually ended up being fairly easy.
I think right away the biggest adjustment was now our training calendar is much longer,
Mm.
whereas Coast Guard and Springfield, we weren't really starting our first official practice till last week of October, first week in November. Excuse me. Whereas now, like when at Quinnipiac, we give them the first week or first two. My first year is we gave them the first 2 weeks, and now give them the first week to get adjusted, and then we're getting right into it. And so the first thing that was for me is like now my progressions that I'm used to doing for the past 8 years are all
Mm.
different, where I'm trying to scramble to get us ready to compete because we
Right.
would come first week in November and we'd have a meet first week of December. So I have a month to get them ready for competition. Now I have all this time. What am I going to do with
Mm.
all this time? And having to kind of configure. Obviously the training and the workouts were very similar, but now technically, what am I doing with this time to work with them? Where it's like I'm used to right away we're great
Mm.
getting into doing some approach work and some short jumps on day one, where now we're doing a lot more multi jumps in the first phase
Mm.
and then getting into it. So that was definitely a big adjustment, just trying to figure out what to do with all this time. And um, I feel like in some ways I try and be a perfectionist where I'm very worried about like how I'm progressing things.
Mm.
So the first year I probably spent like a month stressing about, the first week of practice, and when I really didn't, just kind of overthinking things.
Mhm.
So that was definitely a big adjustment. And then recruiting wise, now I have scholarship, and that's
Mhm.
figuring out that game and kind of budgeting through scholarship and offering scholarship. Um, just learning that was very different. Um, one that and another difference too that was more specific to Quinnipiac is when I was at Springfield and at Coast Guard, we both had an indoor and outdoor track,
Mm.
um, full weight room. I come to Quinnipiac, we have a 2-lane running track that's 180 meters and then
Mm.
4 rec courts. And at the time, we had a weight room that had 4 squat racks. Um, they've now expanded to a weight room that has 16, so that's improved. But trying to navigate not having
Mhm.
facilities, um, and now having to travel to a facility a few times a week and being not having the flexibility that I would normally have of having our own facility. So that was through Quinnipiac, that was a just more, I guess, local kind of adjustment I had to make. Whereas now I'm comfortable with it and
Mhm.
kind of figured out.
How so that scholarship component is one of the bigger unique things, facilities, there's plenty of D3 facilities that don't have indoor facilities and et cetera, et cetera. So that's more like, school dependent. But between D3 and D1, you're academic and need-based only on Division 3, you're academic need-based and athletic scholarship possibilities on Division 1. What have you had to adjust? I really enjoy the recruiting aspect of track and field, but probably mostly because it's relationship building, right? Have you had to, because you recruited in the Division 3 for many years, have you had to change anything? What might have you had to have changed on your recruiting technique, if you will, strategy?
Yeah. I think it's definitely a process. Like recruiting at every place has been different.
Mhm.
Recruiting at the Coast Guard Academy, especially being very part-time, it was almost non-existent for me.
Right.
Um, Whereas like I was getting Ethan, the same thing, was giving me some experience to go, but same thing at a Division 3 military academy. You're kind of working with whatever's kind of, at least from my, I was, like I said, I wasn't super involved in it, but kind of whatever's kind of.
Does the Coast Guard so at the Air Force Academy? I remember talking with Scotty Steffen, their head coach now, a long time ago, and I was like, "Oh man, dude, if you go to the Air Force Academy, it's a full ride. If you just go to the Air Force Academy." So I was like, "So, like how many kids are on your team, Scotty?" And I can't remember what he told me, but it was a lot. And I was like, "So wait, so every kid is a full ride?" I was like, "So you don't have the scholarship limits that other Division 1 schools have." Is the Coast Guard Academy similar? And so I think Army and Navy Academy, same thing. If you get an appointment, you don't just get accepted, right? You get appointment to it. It's everything's taken care of. Is it the same in the Coast Guard?
Yes, and then once they graduated, they're owed 5 years of service. So that's kind of how they
Correct.
pay
But
back. Yeah.
but what I'm wondering is, so it's I know there are other things to consider with an academy. So when I grossly state there are some advantages to going to Air Force Academy, coaching at the Air Force Academy than there is at Texas A&M. I have 100 full rides at the Air Force Academy. I have currently 12.6 for the guys at Texas A&M. I'm grossly misstating that because there are obviously requirements at the Air Force Academy that you don't have at A&M and things like that. At Coast Guard, I mean, because now it's not an athletic scholarship, it is an appointment to the Coast Guard Academy, but you're in Division 3 where no one has athletic scholarships. That feels like a huge, and you're right, you're part-time, so you didn't get to get into it as much as you do say today. That seems like a big advantage.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know from
Yep.
my conversations with Ethan, like I said, I wasn't super involved in him, and he would
Sure,
have
sure,
his kind
sure.
of list, and then he would say, "Why don't you call just to give me experience? Why don't you call these
Hmm.
few and just kind of check up on them and answer some questions and kind of talk about the program a little bit?" So I know he would obviously there you had to get appointed to be there, so um, it'd be a lot of kind of athletes that were interested in coming right away. Um, I know he would work a lot through, like if they couldn't get into the academy directly, a lot of the athletes would go um, to prep school. They'd go
Hmm.
to like the Navy prep school or different prep
Hmm.
schools. So he would recruit a lot through there. So there were times that he would
Oh,
travel to those prep
interesting.
schools and and meet with his athletes, the athletes that he was recruiting. Yeah, so that was
Interesting.
the national champion that I coached. He was a 24-year-old junior
Hmm.
um, from the Bahamas. So that was
Mhm.
he was like a couple months older than me. So that was also interesting.
Wait,
Um,
did they not have to be US? We're getting on tangents. You said you're a tangent guy, and I was like, oh, that's a problem because I'm also a tangent guy. Do they not have to be US citizens? Or did that
we
kid
would
have
have no, we would have a few internationals, yeah.
oh, because
And they
that's not the same for like Army and Navy and Air Forces. That's unfair to ask you because you haven't worked there, but
yeah, I'm not familiar.
that's interesting. Okay. Anyway, so go back. So now you're at Quinnipiac and you have this a scholarship. What have you had to change in your technique, if you will, of recruiting?
I think now it's more kind of my timelines have definitely changed.
Mm.
Um, I think when I was at Springfield, I just was not necessarily aware of kind of what other schools' timeline were. So I kind of like
Mm.
we would have basically we would do kind of official visits like November, like or in like January, I don't know, in end of the fall semester. And thinking about that now, it's like I'm hoping to be rapid, not, having my top kids done by then.
Hmm.
So kind of that kind of opened up a lot and like put kind of pieces together in my head. It's like, oh, that's why I missed out on these kids because I was way too late to the game. Um, but I feel like I approach things differently. I feel like with my recruiting, um, I like to be first. I like to be one of the first coaches that they hear from. So I feel like I get there probably way earlier than I need to,
Hmm.
um, and reach out to them and just start talking to them, trying to and almost build a relationship with them for almost a year. So, and sometimes that works out really well, and sometimes that's really heartbreaking. Um, and there's been times where I've done that. It's especially when I was at the Division 3 level. It's like, hey, coach, like I love you, like you are like the top coach that I'm talking to, but I have this opportunity over here that I'm going to go take, or but like you don't necessarily have my program. And I was like, and then I continue to see them at meets. They're like, coach, like how you doing? I was like, I don't want to talk to you right now. Like you're great, like you're a great person, like gonna be nice to you, but like you're just
Hmm.
bringing up bad memories. So um now I feel like long story short, now I feel like my timelines are a little bit different. I feel like overall like I'm trying to build my list and start talking to people around the same time, but now I'm trying to bring them in a lot sooner, and trying to get, you know, trying to work with their timeline as well as our timeline. Like for example, I had um uh, one of my first official visits a few weeks ago. And she was very talented, very high academic, and she was looking at a lot of high academic Division 3 schools and was receiving a lot of pressure through them and
Hmm.
trying to get her to commit before the even school year started. And now I'm thinking like, oh, now I know why they're doing that because they know like I'm gonna have an official visit with them and I'm gonna offer them some money and they're trying to get ahead of me now.
Right.
Um, so learning about that and um, so just kind of, and I'm just realizing it's all a game and it's all
Yeah.
taking chances. Like when they're coming, like I'm trying to get an idea of where else they're trying to take visits. I'm like, okay, maybe they'll offer them this and then we can kind of compete with that. Just doing a lot
Hmm.
of kind of guessing. And, but I feel like a lot of what I do is just try and, I feel like the relationship is what I feel like where I'm at Quinnipiac, it's the team culture is like one I have not been a part of like before.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like that is what really kind of sells them. And through the recruiting process, I push that a lot.
Hmm.
Obviously, I push the academic programs, I push, the impact that they're going to make to our program,
Hmm.
but talk about the experience that you're going to have with your teammates and the culture that you're going to be a part of where we're all trying to push each other. We're all striving for something great. And when they come for the visit, they see that I'm not just like making that up.
Right.
And they're like, oh, wow, this is so different than any other visit that I've gone on, so really try and I always say whenever they come for their first visit, I say, I want you to go to as many schools as you want to go that you possibly can go to. Make your pros and cons. But I do want to let you know that I try and set the bar high so then when you go off and go to other visits, you'll never forget your visit with me. Like, but I want you to go to any school. I want you to take as many visits as you can because I don't want you to I don't want you to feel pressure from me and come to me and realize you don't like it and then transfer a couple months later.
Hmm.
Like, I want you to experience everything so you are positive that this is where you want to go.
Yeah, I like that. I try to think of like a parent or even as a kid being recruited, I would hate for the coach to say, hey, I don't, if when you come for a visit here, that's got to be your last visit and those kind of pressures. It's like, to me, it exudes so much confidence when you're like, hey, go take as many visits as you want. I'm confident
Yeah.
in what we have here. And you know what? If this ain't the right place for you. It don't matter. This ain't the right place for you. But I'm confident in what we have the picture out there. Everything's got its pros and cons. I wanted to ask you, uh, are you having the experience at a Division 1 school of kids calling saying they want a full ride? I am a little bit of the outside and actually I don't not like, well, that's a double negative. I'm not as against kids doing that as some other coaches are. I'm also not in your seat and have to deal with that. But instead of asking that, because I think about the pros and cons of everything, I wonder when you were recruiting for Division 3 and you don't give out athletic scholarships, did you have instances where kids would say, "Hey, I want a full ride," because they didn't do their homework, if you
Right.
will. Did you have that experience at the Division 3 level?
Um, I think I would get, it wasn't necessarily full ride questions, but I would get questions about like, are there any like sneaky scholarships, that aren't athletics that you guys are a part of.
But
Because I know,
our athletics, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I was like, no, we don't really do that. Um, so I would push like um, so I would just be upfront with them and I'd be like, look, like this is what we can offer. Um, I know you're obviously you're paying a lot to come here and school's a lot and
Yeah.
you're going to get a lot of the better academic package you can get.
Yep.
Through us, like the better you do during your high school time, the more we can help you out. So that was always tough. And obviously I would lose a lot of, really talented athletes because that would be it. And I don't blame them where, when I was at Springfield College is, getting close like is like 60, $70,000 for school. And, Quinnipiac's the same, but I can help you out more than I could before. Whereas
Right.
I can pair that same academic grant with
Right.
athletic scholarship.
Yeah.
So we try and help them out as best we can. And um, we don't, I don't know, what I always say with them too is like, especially when when scholarship comes up, um, I usually say, or my usual answer is like, because we've talked about how important the team culture is like, I'm not going to make you an offer until I make sure that you are fitting with
Mhm.
our program. Like I don't usually offer scholarship to anyone unless they come for an official visit and they're spending time with the team. And
Mhm.
then while they're on their visit, I'm talking to their hosts, I'm talking to other people that have been interacting with them, is
Mhm.
like, what is your feedback? And there's been times when we've done that where we've been really high on somebody and um
Mhm.
one of the hosts is like, I think you should check out their social media and then you might get
Mhm.
a better idea of who they are. And
Mhm.
then we turned down this great athlete that could do that. And it's like, I don't think you're the best fit for what we're trying to do here.
It's super tough. Yeah, I was recruiting was kind of my thing when I was coaching, and I don't know if I'd had learned how to adapt to today's recruiting. When you talk about I'm on social media, 24/7. I've sent out 100 tweets while we've been doing this interview. Um, one of the things I hear, because I have a lot of empathy on both sides, the high school coach and athlete side and the college coach and athlete side. And that example you gave there about, hey, we don't even offer until you come visit. And I like when you said that, I was kind of like, oh, that makes sense. Because if I'm being recruited, I kind of want to, I feel like I would want to know that I'm not being recruited just because of my marks. Like you actually want me, the person on your team. I feel that way. Again, I sit in this seat. I don't know. I wasn't recruited. I wasn't even close to being good enough to be recruited as an athlete out of high school. But I feel like Brendan's calling me that I'm more than just a 6'3" women's high jumper to him. That like he sees value in me as a leader and contributor to the culture and things like that. So if Brendan says, "Hey, we don't even offer until you come for a visit," like, oh, okay, good. Like I want to be not just a number, right? But especially with the cost of school, and this is why I kind of sit on this other side of like, I don't mind that athletes are asking for a scholarship or full ride in the very first email or DM. I really don't. I'm sorry. Again, I'm not sitting in your seat. I might have a much different tune if I was still coaching. But on this side of things of like what college and college expense is, I have zero. And knowing that 99.9% of all those kids aren't going to go pro. So it doesn't matter if they get coached by you or if they get coached by, I don't know, Carl Lewis. They're still not going pro. So do they rack up a ton of debt for one of those schools versus the other? That's affected their life negatively, in my opinion, right? The debt. Anyway, because I've heard this brought up on Twitter world, social media world. I've seen like a high school coach saying, don't bring my kid on a visit if you haven't had at least some talk about the scholarship. Because what if you're bringing them in for a visit? That's a big deal. And you're thinking like, oh man, this person would be great as a walk-on or a books or something like that. And they think, oh, I'm coming on a visit. Coach Wilkins is bringing me in. Like, oh man, yeah, I'm not going to get a full, but man, half 75. And then you sit in the office and maybe have the discussion. It's like, oh, books or, oh, walk on. Well, I wouldn't have wasted my or your time. Do you have some type of discussion about relative amount of scholarship before visit, or do you wait until, and I'm not judging, by the way, this was not a trap question of like, God dang it, Brendan, how do you do that? I'm just curious, how do you handle setting up the expectations, so you guys are on the same playing field when it comes to scholarshiping, the way you do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess it depends
Mm-hmm.
on the individual, and kind of like if they're asking those questions, I'm going to be as upfront as I can,
Mm-hmm.
with also trying not to give much information, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, one of the first things I'll do is, when they come, like I try and get their, um, before they come, I get their unofficial transcripts. Even before they come for an unofficial, I get their unofficial transcripts, give it to admissions, and now I know what you're likely going to get for academic aid. So I can get, it's like, this is what I know that admissions is telling me you're going to get. And usually the verbiage that I try and use, unless they're asking for like specifics, um, is like, I'm trying to give you the best package possible that makes sense with our program. I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
get you as close to tuition as I can.
Mm-hmm.
With our program, it's a little different where we can't give like book scholarships. So currently we can't go past the cost, and maybe I should be giving this information out to rival coaches, but can't go past the cost of tuition. So they end up paying room and board,
Mm-hmm.
um, if we go full tuition. But if it's someone I'm big on, then I don't mind sharing. Like the same thing, the athlete that was getting pressured by, um, Division 3 schools. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, look, they don't want you to come for you're an official with me because they know I'm going to offer. And like, look, and like, I don't tell this. It's like, I'm trying to be upfront with you as I can. Like, you're going to get this with academic aid. You're going to get 33,000 academic aid, and you're going to get, $20,000 from us athletic,
Mm-hmm.
so that's going to pretty much pay for your tuition, and you're just responsible for room and board. If you continue to improve, if you start going to NCAA first rounds and that, then you could potentially earn a full scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked to them about how, you know, and we're never a program that will take scholarship away either. Um, so, and then we always talk about is every year we try and save money, so at the end of the year, we can reward people that are doing well. So if you're working your butt off, even necessarily you're not, you know, performing at
Right.
the highest level that we expect you to, if you're improving, if you are helping us in the conference level, if you are a great person, great leader, you're helping us out academically, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to try and help you as much as we can. Even like we'll have seniors that haven't had a dime all year. We want to make sure that we give them scholarship first.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of
Mm-hmm.
reward them. So I
Yeah.
try and be upfront as they can. And I am not someone, I don't want to like to waste, I don't want people to waste my time. I don't want to waste their time. So at the recruiting process, like if I'm getting a sense that people aren't interested, like I'm like, just tell me now, let's not play this, play this
Mm-hmm.
game. If you're not interested, like I have other people that are very interested, and I'm holding the spot for you. If you're not, let me move on so I can give an opportunity to someone else. And kind of same thing, like I'm not really, I don't want to bring in somebody for an official if I know I'm not going to offer them something,
Right.
because I don't want to have that expectation, um, if they're going. So usually up front, I'll try and, because then like they'll say, oh, like, okay, well, this isn't going to work for me financially. I'm not going to take a day and miss school and come for a visit and stay overnight, miss a
Mm-hmm.
day and a half of school
Mm-hmm.
to come stay with you. And I just wasted that when I could have gone to another school that, can give me an opportunity. So I try not to show all my cards, but try and
Mm-hmm.
show enough where they can make a sound and, educational, a good decision on what they're going, because I'm not really trying to mess people up, and
Yeah.
try and be upfront when, like, same thing, like if I have a couple of people ahead of them, it's like, and they're asking to come for an official visit, and like, look, we have a lot of booked right now. Like I try not to book too many for
Mm-hmm.
that exact reason. If I have a bunch of commits and like you're already booked, now I
Mm-hmm.
can't offer you anything, so
Yeah.
like I try not to overbook on my official visits either, unless I know that I can help them out.
Yeah, that's where, recruiting, this is where I would say, I was a pretty good recruiter. And that's why I've always said, I don't know if I would have adapted to today's recruiting in 2024. My last year was 2005. Were you middle school in 2005? You're,
7th, 8th grade. Yeah.
yeah, I nailed it. Yeah, you were in middle school when I was coaching at Mississippi State. That's how old I am, Brendan. But it's different today in 2024. And like, I was pretty much like, I was really good at creating relationship, but my recruiting was like, it was based on the number. There were kind of two parts to it. So the reason why I didn't care about character, that sounds terrible, because right now you'd say, oh no, I want good character kids, yada, yada. I have back then and still do very much believe in second, third, fourth, maybe in fifth chance, especially for 18-year-old kids. God bless, thank God I was given second, third, fourth, fifth chances, or I wouldn't be where I am today. So it was a little bit like, if they're a quote unquote bad kid, well, they're still fast, and maybe I'm supposed to be their mentor. Maybe this is where they're supposed to be, right? And by the way, I've never seen a really good kid, regardless of the event, who did have a bad attitude or bad character, not get a scholarship if their grades were fine. I still haven't seen this coach that says, oh yeah, I saw a bad tweet, so I stopped. I was like, well, they must not have been fast enough. That's why you really dropped them, because if they're, on the Division I level, if they were 10 flat out of high school and you saw a bad tweet, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that kid's still going to get a good scholarship somewhere. Call me crazy, but that's what I believe in, right? So now you guys and gals your recruiting is so much better. Like it is a number that's important. Maybe that's the first thing that attracts you, but body type, like, oh, can they get better with the way I coach? What's their history of practice? What's obviously majors and all those kind of things still play into it. What kind of leadership? Like, is this a kid like, oh, okay, they're not really the marks I want, but man, she's going to come in and get the ship going because she's a leader, whatever, like, oh, that might be worth 1,000 or 2,000 or whatever more. You guys are just so much more advanced on it. There's so much more nuances that you guys and gals are looking into it now. That's why I wonder, like, I know, and this is a good example, and we're going over time. Are you good? I'm so sorry. I should have asked you.
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. This whole thing with Division I don't even want to say potentially. My understanding is it's going to happen, a roster cap of 45. And I say roster cap because it's not necessarily, by the way, you can give up to 45 full scholarships, but roster cap of 45, meaning you can run 45 guys on your team and only give out 10 scholarships if you want. But I hope that we eventually, maybe 10 years, 20 years down the line, that all Division I's are at 45 cap and it's 45 full rides. Because one of the things that I always was jealous of for football, because they're all full rides on the Division I side, right? And so I was like, oh, because you've had to have seen this happen. I know this still happens. You offer a kid, you really like this kid, and you give them 40%, 50%, whatever, and they come back and say, oh, coach, I love you, love the school, but man, this other school's giving me 70%. And you go back like, well, can I get to 75? Barring all the dollars being the equal, right? You start playing this game of, well, can I afford 75% for this kid? When it's all full rides, that stuff's off the table. It's all full. The money's the same. You come to Quinnipiac or you come to my alma mater at Troy, it's the same. So now Brendan gets to recruit on Coach Wilkins. Hey, do you want to work with Coach Cunningham or Coach Wilkins? Because I believe in ... for training. You ask Coach Cunningham what he does, and then you get to pick. Like, that seems much more like, I think this is a hard way to say this. I think the air quote better coaches win more that way. When you take money off the table, I think the kids go, oh, that's the kind of person I want to lead me. This is the type of person I want to mentor me. And I believe in their style of coaching, where I think sometimes kids go, let's use distance runners. They're high mileage kids. Let's say they're the type of kids that need to run, 70, 80, 90, 100 miles per week. But because of a low mileage coach offering them more money, they go that route, which I'm not blaming them, but now it's not a good fit. They go there and they're 30 miles per week or whatever. And it's like, oh man, you'd have been a better athlete if you'd have been over here, but because of money, they couldn't offer you. Now, when it's all full rides, it's like, oh yeah, that's the better fit for me. Brendan likes to do a ton of plyos. That's the better fit for me as a jumper. Oh, this coach over here likes to run 800-meter repeats for high jumpers. That's better for me as a high jump. I'm going to go over here. You take money off the table. Is a cat attacking you, or I see it. And I'm like, yeah. I was concerned.
He's he's scratching the back of the chair, and I think he usually likes to sit in this chair, so he's
jealous. He wants some camera time. I get it.
It's getting close to there. Yeah.
To dinner time?
Usually around like 5 o'clock.
I hear.
It'll be fine. Yeah. Sorry, I was pushing.
Yeah, I saw you, and I was like, I just saw like a tail flip. I was like, it's attacking him. He's just, I'm not a big cat fan, so I just automatically concerned for you. So I just wonder, like, where this is going for track and field, and how you'll have to adjust. All of our coaches will have to adjust when we're there. And the crazy thing is, we don't know how to adjust today. And I hate that we don't know how to adjust today, even though we know this is coming, because that affects your recruiting today. You'd recruit differently today if you knew, hey man, in 2026, you will have a cap of 45 on your team. That you have to, whether you have 10 scholarships or 45, you will have to recruit differently. And right now you're it feels like everybody's recruiting in this gray area. And I don't think that's
Right.
fair to you. And I don't think that's fair to these 18-year-olds that are trying to make very important decisions either.
Right. No, and in that kind of, I guess that picture that you're painting with like going towards the coach, I've definitely been in situations where I've lost kids, I've lost athletes, and I'm kind of like, did you do your research? Did you realize that they don't have a jumps coach that's going to be working with you every single day? Or, like, did you look at that? So that can be frustrating where it, I guess, makes it a little even playing field. Um, but yeah, no, I feel like I've gone through a lot of unknowns in my life.
Mm-hmm.
4 years ago, unknown if, you know,
Yeah.
my job was even going to exist, and now kind of in a
Right.
similar kind of realm. But with us, I guess I wasn't too worried about it in some sense because like roster caps would kind of match us. So we only have I don't know if you're familiar, we have women's track and field and cross country. We just have men's cross country.
Hmm.
Um, and on the track side, we only have 45, 46 women. So it kind of makes it easier where we have other people in our conference that have 115 women on their team.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean about this gray area. There's people with 100 people on their team. It's like, wait, I got to go to 45 next year.
Right.
Screw recruiting. I got to figure out my own team, my own 100 kids right here. That's
Right. And I
crazy.
think I think especially women's track and field with some programs, a lot of it gets um, used as an admissions tool. So like bring as many people you can in now. And if that changes, like with that program, like they have almost 200 men and women on their team. And it's, first of all, I don't know how you coach that many people. Like I'm scrambling around trying to coach, 10 people, let
Mm.
alone 10 high jumpers.
Right, right,
So
right,
it's,
right.
that's already tough as it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but then now, like you go to that format, you're about to have half of your roster, um, which is tough. And I don't know what those programs are going to do.
And that's the answer. I don't know because there's just no guidance right now. It reminds me of when the World Athletics came out and said, "Hey, we're going to experiment with a long jump thing," and then they didn't say
Oh yeah,
anything else, and so we all just were like, "Well, wait a minute. Well, you can't do this and that." It's like, well, they never actually told us what they're doing, so we just get to go make up our own things now as coaches, and we're really good at that. That's where we are with the scholarship, and it's like we don't really know. We guess that's what's going on, but then the House versus NCAA, which I think is the main driver of that, got pushed back. I mean, it's just I don't know. I just don't like. I I feel more bad for the young kids, and even the in the example of the 100 roster places that got to go to 45. I feel more bad for them than I do the coaches because I believe the coaches are the most flexible. Like you guys have gotten it done with no indoor facility or only a cross country on the men's. Like you're so flexible and adaptable. The coaches are going to figure this out really quick. Like for the body, not just like, oh, these top 10 coaches are going to figure it out like this. The body of coaching is going to figure this out really quick. And the sport of track and field is going to move on really, really positively, in my opinion. 18-year-old kids, I worry about them. Uh, they don't know what underwear they want to wear tomorrow. And they got to pick a school and a coach that they may come into the squad of 100. I mean, plenty of people make that choice because those rosters are out there, and I love those rosters. Make that choice to be the 101st person, and then find out the very next year, oh, we got to cut down to 45.
yep,
That's crazy. That's not fair to that kid. It's really not.
yeah.
Brendan, we're past our time, brother. Leave us with this. As you stare into the 2025 season, and you seem like a little bit of a planner, so maybe you're already thinking 26, 27. What's got you excited, man, as you look at Quinnipiac, your program, what's got you excited about the future there at Quinnipiac?
So I feel like this past year was one of my strong, and I'm hoping that this year is even stronger year recruiting wise, but brought in some really talented and just like great women that fit our culture perfectly, and I feel like are going to help take us to a different level. So I'm really excited to see what they do, as well as all of our returners. We graduated a few women that were point scorers for us, but 90% of the team is still here and still strong, and we still have a few people hanging on with COVID eligibility that are coming back. So,
Is that right?
um,
It,
yeah, last year we had someone in their 6th year that graduated last year.
wow.
Um, And then we
It
have
is 25 going to be the last year for like the
this is the
super.
last.
Yeah. Okay.
This should be
Wow.
it. Yeah.
That
So we
that
have.
really affected college athletics, man. Holy cow.
Oh yeah, no, and
Mm,
it's and I don't know. I still haven't gotten into the transfer portal. I try and
mm,
veer away from it, and
mhm,
because I kind of in the mindset, or even when I was at Division 3 level, like someone transferring to me, I'm like, okay, are you just going to transfer again when you don't like it
mm,
again? So
mhm.
try and veer for that. We do get some people
Good
that
point.
transfer, but it's mainly like grad students that will come
Mhm.
on it. Right now, it's mainly on the distance side. But yeah, we have 3 women that will that still have eligibility that are staying. Um, so it's exciting. I mean, and we just had 2 teams join the conference for this year. So for this, we kind of had 3 teams that were like true, like full track teams.
Mhm.
Um, so it'd be a lot of like 3 teams kind of battling each other and kind
Mhm.
of um, so for us, the past 3 years, we've been just second place. Like
Mm.
there was one year they lost by a half point. It was the year before I got there, and then my first year
That's
we lost by
heartbreaking.
like 14 points, which still isn't that much, and
Mhm.
lost by I think like 20 this past year.
Mm.
Our biggest weakness is um, because our team is small and we have 3 full-time staff. We unfortunately don't really have a throws program. We have one woman who
Mm.
throws, and then I have a few multis.
Right.
I did get her to score 1 point in shot, which was awesome.
Nice.
Um, and being the jumps coach, I'm kind of the field coach now, so I'm
Mm.
working with those. And our head coach is great, where she is more predominantly a distance coach, but she's coached far better throwers than I have. Um, so now bringing in 2 more teams that are full track teams, now that instead of because we lose by maybe 20 points and they score 30 unanswered points of the throws.
Right.
So now the hope is these 2 teams coming in
Yeah. Yeah.
will with throws programs will now take those points away and then we just take off. So
That's
we're
cool.
looking for our first title in track and field uh, in in our conference. Cross country, we've won conference the past 2 years and we're looking for a three-peat this year.
Wow.
Definitely going to be tough, um, but we're looking strong and we always say season for the birds, so we'll kind of
Mhm.
see what happens. Whoever shows up on race day, so excited for that. Um, Talked before is we don't really have much facilities, and a big project for me this year was I wrote a big proposal to get a raised runway and a sand pit
Yeah.
and vault mats. So that'll be a big game
Yeah.
changer for my group
Nice.
where
That's right.
some of my athletes were spending like 60 to 70 hours traveling every day to practice. And
Oh,
now they get to save time and stay on campus. So really excited for that and see that helps us with not only our program, but recruiting as well.
for sure.
Um, Having more stuff on campus to get to stay on campus. So definitely a really exciting time for
Yeah.
Quinnipiac track and field. And we'll see what happens.
Well, conference is my favorite meet. As much as nationals are great, and they are great, it's phenomenal. There was just something about conference and going for the conference title. So to lose by half a point, it's heartbreaking. We lost by 0.66 one year. We had a tie in pole vault that get us a 0.33, and it just breaks your heart because everybody matters. Every point, every half a point, man. That 1 point from your multi in the shot put would have won it in that year that they were half a point down. You know what I'm saying? So I
Right.
love conference. So it's exciting when schools are like, yeah, we're vying for a conference championship. That's a lot of fun, man. So I can see the excitement level there, and look forward to seeing how that all pans out.
Yeah, no, and I see different size of our women. Like same thing that high jumper.
Yeah.
Like some days I'm like, are you sure you're a high jumper? And then when it comes time for conference, it's like, oh my gosh, everyone get out of the way.
Yep.
Like she is getting ready to go. And it's
Because you're
you see it.
competing for someone else, 29 other
Yeah.
women, 20 other teammates. You know, it's
Yeah.
different than even nationals when you're only by yourself. It's like, well, it'd be nice to win, but you know, I'm not jumping for Juanita and Lisa anymore. But in conference, you are. So that's why it's my favorite meets, man. I love conference meets.
Yeah.
Brendan, man, this was a lot of fun. So much fun. We went over our time. I'm trying to be real respectful of your time, and I'm just so sorry. But this was fascinating, man. I think what's interesting in the podcast in the last couple of interviews that we've had here. Of course, we continue to uplift and honor the journey and your journey. I mean, that's fascinating to not even be thinking about it into like the last part of your senior year of college. I mean, that's amazing. There's that gives me hope when I see someone as a sophomore and they're like, yeah, I'm not going to coach. And it's like, man, maybe you will. You know, you
Yeah.
still got a couple years to decide, right? So I love that journey, and it's interesting right now as we're, you know, fall of 2024, of all the changes that are going on with NCAA. Because you know, I stand by what I said. I think you and your peers are going to be fine because you're so tough. You're so used to making tough decisions and adaptability. That's, I mean, it's the name of the game of a track coach. Learning how to coach pole vault, that's adaptability, right? I mean, that's a tough event to try to coach, and you've done it, you know, excellently. So I think coaches are fine. I am worried about our young people that are going to make decisions that are, you know, could be financially very, very costly, and we're already up against it with student loans and things like that already. So it's interesting to have this conversation. So I do appreciate your perspective and experience on that level. That's why I was glad we could go a little bit over time, because I really was interested in you know, your feedback on those kind of things that are going on right now in our great sport. So so thank you, man. Really, really grateful. I love your journey. Your journey matters, man. And I'm just so humbled to be able to share it with our audience. You were so authentic in your telling of your story. It's just amazing. I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I'm just really, really grateful for your time, my friend.
Yeah. As long as it touches someone, you know, but no, I appreciate you. And like I said, always good on time. I probably could have been on here for another 2 hours, but so
Yeah,
I appreciate you. And
you could
go
have,
ahead,
but your
sorry.
cat would not have let you. That's the problem.
Yeah, he's eyeing me right now. But no, I appreciate all you do and all you do for us coaches. It's this is something I've been looking forward to doing for a while. And you know, no, you are definitely really appreciated with throughout all coaches. So thank you for
Awesome.
all you do.
Yeah, well, you guys deserve it. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. Like I said, you know, I'm not sure it's a podcast if no one presses play. And I'm just so, so grateful that you'd press play to hear Brendan's story this week and all the stories we've had in the past. And again, guess what? We're going to do it again next week. Join us next week. We'll do it all over again. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.